One baby, Kwame Nkrumah. One baby, African Kabam, and not the Queen in the Baba, and Kwame Nkrumah, Yakawa. Akusumban, Wabwe and Papa B. Umotaway, and yet Chonya Pride. Sikaz again, wasting now, a Kwame Nkrumah, Yakawa. Forward forever, forward Africa. No day shall raise thee from the records of time. She will always be remembered, and your enemies forgotten. Kwame, Yakawa. Isn't it what that? You found it on Simu, Africa Gabon, you know, you missing Baba, and you Kwame Nkrumah, Yakawa. On your pride, she gets again. Wabo, Kwame Nkrumah, Yakawa. fountain isn't it to a deck. Yeah, fountain on Simu, African Kabam, and not the Queen Sinababa, and Kwame Nkrumah, Yakawa. And baby, Umutu way, and yet on your bride. Again.
Okay, what it do, Sober Soldier, salute. This is Stick from Dead Prayers with my partner, M1, and you are in tune to gotkushTV.
There was empires in Africa called Kush, Timbuktu, where every race came to get booked. My success to you, even if you wish me the opposite. Sooner or later, we'll all see who the prophet is.
Achomi na ajele gbojo kwe ni biane nyenko gotkushTV nyeyiradon. My name is Na Ajele Gbojo Kwe, and right now you're watching gotkushTV. Thank you.
Ghana, democracy under fire. Delving deep into the political theater of Ghana in the lead up to the general election in December 2024. We welcome activist, organizer, and writer Bonchi Anyete as our regular co-host and analyst, breaking down the dynamics in his unique and entertaining way. Tune in to our very first show, Decoding Ghana's Political Theater, Tuesday, the 27th of February, 2024, from 8 p.m. GMT, live on gotkushTV. And we look forward to you joining us every fourth Tuesday of the month throughout 2024. Ghana, democracy under fire. This is a show not to be missed. Ghana, democracy under fire. Delving deep into the political theater of Ghana in the lead up to the general election in December 2024. We welcome activist, organizer, and writer Bonchi Anyete as our regular co-host and analyst, breaking down the dynamics in his unique and entertaining way. Tune in to our very first show, Decoding Ghana's Political Theater, Tuesday, the 27th of February, 2024, from 8 p.m. GMT, live on gotkushTV. And we look forward to you joining us every fourth Tuesday of the month throughout 2024. Ghana, democracy under fire. This is a show not to be missed. Tendai mwadi be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai mudzima mokuro, giving praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. Yes, indeed, family, we are here. They are again for our Ghana Independence Special, where we will be taking a look at the achievements of the first president of Ghana, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. So we want to say Meda Sepa, we want to say Oyiwalado, we want to say Akpe, we want to say thank you in every language that is spoken in the beautiful nation of Ghana for joining us this evening for this exploration. And we have two very special guests coming to you. So as we set up the show, please like the video as you come through. Hit the like button right here now. If you are not subscribed to gotkushTV, subscribe to gotkushTV. If you would like to support us financially on a one-off or a monthly basis, we encourage you to check out the Patreon, brothers and sisters. Check out the Patreon, which is linked in the description to the video. All contributions welcomed in advance. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters, we are here. We are Hey, and it's a very, very interesting time. It's a very, very interesting time at the moment around the global African world. And whenever it comes to our Independence Days, yeah, you know, when many of us have a love-hate relationship with our Independence Days, we enjoy the party, we enjoy the celebration, but they always seem to be tinged with the question, how independent are we really? How independent are we really? That is a question that you have to ask anywhere you're there in the African world. That means whether you come from Ghana, as we are focusing on today, whether you come from Nigeria, as one of our guests will be coming from today, whether you focus from whether you come from Jamaica or Antigua, as my family come from, I just say it go. Anyway, you're there, whether you come from Haiti, we have to ask the question, how independent are we really? Yeah. And so we're not necessarily going to be asking that question specifically today, but it will come to light in the midst of the conversation, I am sure. Yeah. But we just feel it's necessary to signify and mark this day, because this day was a day of significant celebration across the African world, not just in the nation of Ghana. And stay tuned right to the end. Stay tuned right to the end. I'm gonna play for you a song, yes, that was made by an African from the Caribbean, yes, celebrating the independence of Ghana. You know what I mean? So we have to just understand that the independence of Ghana was considered to be a significant cause for celebration across the African world. Yeah. So we just have to know that, you know what I'm saying? And so we mark this day with an exploration of the achievements of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, so as to detail the kinds of problems that he was trying to solve. And, you know, as a basis for assessing where we're there right now, not just in Ghana, but across the continent of Africa and across the African world. So once again, share the link far and wide, brothers and sisters. It's going to be a very, very powerful, beautiful, and important conversation. One of our guests is with us. We are waiting the arrival of our second guest, so do stay tuned. But I am sure that she will be here, of course, if she is able, okay? But we await the arrival of our dear Auntie Affiong, and we are going to invite our brother Bonchi and Yete. Bonchi and Yete forward to the platform right here now. He is an activist, organizer, writer, and agripreneur, kings and queens, hailing from the beautiful nation of Ghana. And we bring him forward now. Greetings, brother Bonchi and Yete.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. So I was speaking on mute there. What is the lighting like? I feel like the lighting is too much. Should I try and move my
seat? You know what you need to do? Yeah, so if you can sit in front of the light, sorry, if you can sit as though the lighting is in front of you rather than behind you, we'll see you better.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, if you sit facing the light, that would make sense. Yeah. All right. Giving thanks to Bonchi and Yete. As said, brothers and sisters, our good auntie, Auntie Affiong. I was in correspondence with her just about an hour ago, so she's, you know, in tune and everything. There we go. That's a lot better. You know what I'm saying? All right. So yeah. So we're she's gonna be here. We're not sure what the hold up is, but we will definitely keep you in tune throughout the duration of the show, brothers and sisters. Right, Bonchi and Yete. Just give us a vibe. You're currently in the nation of Ghana right about now. Give us a vibe for what the energy is on the ground in relation to Ghana independence. How are the people celebrating? Is it a big thing every year, or is it more, people are engaged in deep political consideration and debate and all these things? What's the vibe like, Bonchi and Yete?
The vibe, Ghana independence is always really, really interesting. I was with a sister today from Ethiopia, and she was expecting there to be more. She's in Accra while she's here. She was expecting there to be, processions down the street and all of that. And I said that no, for a number of reasons, there isn't. The easiest answer for why there isn't is that there's actually the independence celebrations at state level are actually done on a tour basis, kind of like literally a tour, a country tour basis. So every year, a different region, a different stadium or public space hosts it. So this year it was hosted in the Eastern region, Kofridwa. I think Kofridwa is the capital of the Eastern region. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong. But yeah, so that it took place there this year. And then on the ground in Ghana, yes, you are going to hear a lot more Nkrumah audio coming from a lot of the media houses. And it's also some very surprising stations and some commentaries. Nkrumah Never Dies. I was at the Nkrumah bookshop earlier today. Yeah, you're going to have to rein me in a lot. I won't be offended when you say it's enough. There's a lot of opinions I feel like I can speak to with authority on a regular basis, non-stop. The Friday movies, certain other non-revolutionary contents. Including Nkrumah in particular, I've read every single one of his books. I don't know. Let me not be disingenuous. I have failed to finish Consciencism. But I really want to start it again. It's kind of like one of those quasi New Year's resolutions every year.
Every year, 100%.
Start and finish Consciencism. I think I've started it easily 5 times. Five times. Struggled to finish it. But yeah, hopefully this year will be the year. But yeah, there's just so much around the Nkrumah conversation. I'm really waiting for Auntie Effiong to come on board. I'm such a big fan of her. I became aware of her through, of course, the Akebela revivalist movement. I think you guys played a video of hers at one of your programs. And I was like, who is this? I was so impressed. I can't remember how old I was at the time. But this is, partly due to my sort of ignorance, as well as anything else. I wasn't used to hearing conscious continental African people speaking to these things, like radical contemporary, basically the peak of that was a sort of Winnie Mandela for me. I knew about Winnie Mandela, and that was it. You know what I mean? So to hear her, and I can't remember what she was even talking about in the video, but I was massively impressed.
Beautiful.
I think it was a couple of years before I was able to go and actually find her stuff on YouTube, and start sort of collecting her content from there. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, what she brings to it.
100%. 100%.
I'm very humbled for that. I hope you at home or wherever you the listener is enjoy this, and that you take a lot away from this, and that you also contribute. The last podcast, or I should say, the podcast that we did, I got a lot of food for thought from the comments, and that's why I really do favor the live format.
100.
I really hope that we're able to keep that going, and enjoy the responses and the questions that get asked. That for me is a massive part of the takeaway. So talking about Nkrumah today, I was thinking about it, like what position do I take? I'm an Nkrumah fanboy. I consider myself an Nkrumahist. So what's the approach? And for me, I think the best way of approaching it is like the relevance, because we can go off listing all the great things Nkrumah did, and you could literally do this for 24 hours and not list them all.
Right. Or
4 hours, and then speak to each of his achievements. Just a little bit of context, a little break, drink some water. 24 hours, we cover it all.
We would. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, Bonchi, we're here to do that, and yes, the whole conversation is to contextualize, our positioning in today's world, just using the achievements of Nkrumah as a guide. Yeah. Oh, and Auntie Effiong was just here, and I was about to bring her through, and she's dropped off. So we're gonna just pause for a second.
Okay.
And not pause for a second. We're just gonna wait for her to come back again.
Okay.
So but she's definitely here, all right. Okay, so brothers and sisters, Bunchy's here. Auntie Afyong will be returning shortly. And it's going to be a beautiful conversation. Yeah. Now, as Bunchy has said, there's so many things that we can get through. I like him, have felt a complete conscientism, and I'm definitely going to do it. Very, very soon. Hopefully this year. Actually, I'm deep in a political economy space as far as my reading at the moment. Deep in it. But that book is an essential one. What if you had a favorite Nkrumah book, Bunchy? What would it be? Considering the fact that Nkrumah wrote like between 16 and 19 books.
That's a hard question to answer, and I feel like my answer will vary every day. The easy answer is neocolonialism. That was the first Nkrumah book I read, and for no other reason than the title sounded really interesting. Like I didn't heard of the concept of neocolonialism. I should say consciously by then. And I saw neocolonialism. I'm reading this book, and I always make that comment that when I was reading it, I kept returning to the bit at the front where it tells you that it was printed, it was published.
Yeah.
So I must have read this book. I can't remember what year it was, maybe 2003 or 4. And I kept returning. How did Nkrumah know exactly how Ghana was going to turn out?
Yes,
in 1964.
Yes.
In 1964, how?
Yes.
And of course, with learning, I came to understand that, of course, Nkrumah was making extrapolations from colonialism to understand what neocolonialism was going to be. So the easy answer is definitely neocolonialism. But yeah, given the situation every day, my answer might vary for different reasons.
Yeah, for me, it's between that one and Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. It's between those two for me. I think I read Class Struggle first. That was the first full Nkrumah that I read. Then Handbook. We read that together. Handbook in a study group.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then I think I read Neocolonialism, and then I read Ghana, the autobiography. And the others like Africa Must Unite. I can't, I read it all after that. You know what I'm saying? So, but I haven't finished Conscientism, although I've started it many times and skimmed through it and found different things and referenced it at different points. You know what I'm saying? Greetings, Auntie Afyong.
Good evening, Auntie.
Auntie, you're on mute. Let me unmute you if I can. Oh, I can't. I can. Yes.
Yeah. Greetings. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, Auntie. We can hear you loud and clear.
Don't worry.
Greetings, my brother. How are you?
I'm very well, Auntie. How are you?
I'm good. Well, hanging in here. What's happening, Shaka?
I'm fine, Auntie. It's a pleasure, as always, to have you with us. You know what I'm saying? We know that you're a very, very busy woman. And so whenever you take time to join us, we are blessed and grateful and thankful. So it's a yeah.
Are you in Nigeria, Auntie?
Yep.
Oh, okay, that's why I was surprised when you said I'm good. I said, is anybody in Nigeria good right now with this?
No. If I was a Christian, I would have said, it is well. That's the answer, Nigerians give, it is well. In the midst of chaos, it is well. Yeah. So me saying I'm good, I'm just speaking about my aspirations.
All right, Auntie, we'll delve deeper into those aspirations on another show, okay? All right, Auntie, as we know, it's Ghana Independence today, and I was speaking about the fact that the Ghana Independence is always a significant event in the Pan-African world, and well, any independence, in the African world, Africa or the Caribbean is significant. But we always end up asking the question, how independent are we really? But even in that context, Ghana Independence is significant, not just because of independence, but because of its significance to the Black world at that time. And let's start with that significance. Why is Ghana independence, even among the Pan-African community, a significant event to mark, like on an annual basis?
First of all, for lack of better analogies, to use, Ghana is actually like our Mecca, and Ghana is also our Jerusalem, so to speak, because that is where, as Africans, both on the continent and in the diaspora, the concrete reality that we could actually chase out, these criminals who colonized us, that came to manifestation. Now, my dad wasn't a politically conscious person or anything like that. He was a technocrat, was an electrical engineer. But I remember, he told me as a teenager when I asked him about Nkrumah, because I'd been fascinated about Nkrumah, but I didn't know who he was. There was some discussion we're having, and I remember I was still a teenager, and he said, on the day Ghana got independence, my dad and my mom, they were in England as students, studying and working in the 50s. So he said, on the day Ghana got independence, all of us, meaning every African, we're walking all over London and England with our chests out. We were so proud. We walked into any shop, we went anywhere, and we looked these white people in their faces, and you could just tell. And of course, my dad, was Nigerian. I thought, Now, this is just a story he's telling me. At the time he's telling me, the impact doesn't really sink in. I just know of the drama of what he was saying. And he was 6 foot something. And, he stood up just to show me, how proud they were, and I really couldn't figure it out. But, that's what he said. So that's that. I like to use, basic, simple, concrete examples. He made every Black person feel proud that we could actually chase out these criminals who came to colonize us and, begin to rule our countries, on our own. So that's a very basic experience, that generation had of Ghana, and what it signified. It's like, you've been in darkness for such a long time. Even when somebody strikes a match, not even a candle or anything, just a match, the power from the lights, from that little match is so powerful in, a space that had been filled with the darkness. And of course, the darkness was the darkness of colonization, and oppression, by criminals from Europe. So that was that. Now, that was the fight, about, winning the fight in the ring, as it were. And of course, there's also a subsequent issue of what he then did in those few years, that he was in power in Ghana, how he turned Ghana into a liberated space, for Black people from all over the world. But that was just the power of the significance of, the achievement of political or flag independence at that time, that, what? We can do it. It's actually possible. And that's a powerful example, very powerful. So that's why, that's why Ghana remains what it is for us today. That symbol of the possibility of us living as Africans, in our own land, on our own terms, so to speak. Yeah.
Give him thanks, Auntie. And you spent a significant amount of time living in Ghana as well. I just got an assessment from Brother Bunchy about the vibe in Ghana today. Yes, but just give me your experience in terms of how Ghana independence is celebrated in Ghana from the time that you were living there. What are your observations about the celebration itself?
I think, that saying that a prophet is never loved or appreciated in his own hometown. I think that applies, to any of the proverbial prophets, quote unquote, and certainly to Nkrumah. Ghanaians don't, some do, but, they don't know about Nkrumah like the rest of us do. Why? Because he was just a Ghanaian, like them. But, one time when I was filming for a documentary on Nkrumah, and I asked a brother, although he happens to be Ghanaian, but, he's a Ghanaian in the diaspora and he's a Pan-Africanist. He said, look, Nkrumah is to us what Jesus is to the Christians, us being Pan-Africanists, I thought, isn't that blasphemous? I said, no, he's just telling me the truth. that to attempt, to describe what Nkrumah is, that as far as we as Pan-Africanists are concerned, that Nkrumah is our Jesus, quote unquote, so to speak. That's our Messiah. So that was that. But in terms of in Ghana, because there's been a lot of things, even the thing about the real truth about the Nkrumah's time in government and the role of the CIA, it still has not been broken down fully. It still has not been absorbed. That work has still not been done. So people know, oh yes, this happened and bits and pieces, but the full impact and the significance of what happened in 1966, that it was a derailing of the whole continent, and certainly a derailing of our trajectory as Black people, that hasn't sunk in, to the average Ghanaian. So, but there's the celebration of independence, but also there are people in Ghana, because the thing about Ghana is very interesting. It's not like Nigeria. In Ghana, they have what they call traditions, political traditions. So if your dad was an Nkrumahist or your mom, the probability is that you will be an Nkrumahist. If he was from MPP, they have that, thing, that you two, generations to come, you'll also be from that, political tradition, so to speak. So they have that. And of course, the right wing is still well and alive in Ghana, always trying to minimize his name. But the thing is that Nkrumah's name is etched in world history, not in Ghanaian history, just in world history, so it can never be removed and, taken away. But, that's what it is. And it's true, that Nkrumah was a powerful African. He wasn't a wonderful Ghanaian, and he never set out to be. It's just like Gavi said, from the beginning. He said, he has a whole continent to claim. Why would he claim an island? So Nkrumah, it wasn't the best of Ghanaians, it was one of the most powerful Africans. So that's what it is.
Give him thanks, Auntie. I'm gonna ask Bunchy one more question before we get into the actual substance of the achievements. Just based upon Auntie Afion's assessment of the Prophet never being fully recognized in their home nation, had the pleasure of visiting the new and improved Nkrumah Memorial recently, and did a video on that, brothers and sisters. So if you wanna hear my assessment of the Nkrumah Memorial, check out the video on gotkushTV about whether our memorials to our great ancestors should be tourist attractions, and these things, and where that comes from, what that yields in terms of what we create in a nation. But Bunchy, just what's your assessment of the role and the significance of that memorial site to Nkrumah and its function in the national consciousness of the people of Ghana as it stands today?
Let me be negative.
You've gone low, my brother. Or is it just me?
Can you hear me?
Your mic sounds very low now.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's just very low. Brothers, let me know if I'm the only one that's hearing Bunchy low, because I can persevere. If you all are hearing him very clearly, I'm good. So just let me know if Bunchy's volume is low. Continue, Bunchy. We'll persevere in the meantime.
Yeah, I haven't changed my settings or anything, so.
Okay.
I'm using a mic thing on my thing, so if.
Okay, it's gradually getting louder now. It's gradually getting louder now. Continue.
Okay. I was gonna say, let me be negative and start from what is missing from that mausoleum.
Right.
First of all, there's the bookshop. The bookshop that was there in the previous iteration. It is still physically there, the building, but it's been abandoned.
Yes.
And now the so-called sort of shop that's there is really just serving up, things of importance, cultural artifacts, but it has missing the pantheon of Nkrumah books that were there. Why should that be when there's a fully stocked Freedom bookshop not 3 miles from there, near Nkrumah Interchange, appropriately named, locally known as Circle. And then on top of that, what was interesting about what's not there, which I do approve of, is you know that there's a section of the mausoleum where there's a wall and there's 6 pictures of Nkrumah.
Yes.
Now, my understanding is that was supposed to feature all the men of the Big Six.
Right.
Now, the Big Six, our fellow listeners today, is a whole conversation of Ghanaian intrigue and double talk and propaganda that we're not going to get into today. But part of what Auntie mentioned about the right-wing mitigation attempts to mitigate Nkrumah's legacy is this elevation of this mythical Big Six, which I enjoy talking about, but like I said, it take too much time. So yes, as I understand it, there was a whole lot of involved conversation and all of that, and yeah, that didn't take place. And instead of the 6 people, we've got 6 different images of Nkrumah, which I very much approve of. That said, on a positive note, the history walk through the place is very significant. It's very powerful. The tour that I've actually now experienced a couple of times. The tour guides are really quite learned. I would like to go with a few different groups. I found that from my experience of tours at the dungeons in Cape Coast and Cape Coast region, Elmina and so forth, it can very much depend on who is there and how informative the tours can be. So I'm wondering how kind of like what the group I was with had to do with the strength of the tour that we received. I'd like to think that they always deliver a strong tour that speaks about what Auntie mentioned about the CIA involvement and what exactly were their interests. Well, you can't go into all the interests of the CIA and white monopoly capital in a tour, but they really did get as radical content-wise.
Oh, did they? I never experienced that at all. I've been.
That's what I'm talking about. Is it are different groups getting sometimes I won't say sanitized.
No, they never went into that at all with us. I've been on 3 occasions now, and it's never been that. Yeah. So the first time I went with you, and then I went a couple years ago with my family, and I went again this time round because I had more family with me, basically.
Are we talking about the mausoleum or are we talking about the dungeons?
No, the dungeons.
Oh, it's about dungeons.
Sorry, the mausoleum. The mausoleum.
Oh, the mausoleum. Okay.
Yeah, they never went into no CIA, no neocolonialism, nothing, right?
Oh,
In fact, when you get into there's a room where a lot of Nkrumah artifacts are, and they have the narrative along the walls. There was literally no tour as far as that was concerned. Really, they just introduced it to you and said that you can go around and read what's on the wall.
Interesting. Okay, no. See that you were shortchanged. I've been to the tour twice since the renovation, whatever it's called. Right. And yes, both times they've gone into way more detail than I was expecting. To be fair, my expectations of sort of mainstream dialogue around Ghana's experiences at the hands of neo-colonists is in the gutter. My expectations are in the gutter. So anything of that side, I'm already surprised, but not impressed. And after this, I was impressed by the caliber of the tours given. But like I said, I know that the tour can vary. I don't know what affects it, whether they take a look at these guys. Some people say, okay, these guys look like troublemakers. These guys sort of know the inside deal. We'll give them the others, I don't know, maybe somebody's got a white girlfriend or something. They're like, okay, these guys. Changes the tone sometimes of different tours.
Right.
I'm not surprised at what you're saying. I've experienced it at the dungeons where I will fight the tour guide at the dungeons. Like, how are you saying that?
Right.
And then sometimes you'll get somebody and they'll be just dropping some bombs, bringing everything you need to bring around the anti-slavery movements of the regions, and kind of like what it took for Europe to sustain that genocide for centuries. So yeah, I'm not surprised at what you're saying.
Giving thanks, Bonchi and Yete. Actually, interestingly, my experience of the dungeons this time, I went to Cape Coast, took my family to Cape Coast Castle this time, and the tour guide that we have was actually very good. Yeah, and into some deep depth. So it is hit and miss. You know what I'm saying? Depends
so
on
with the dungeons, I know APRP that I'm a member of, there has been some active look to engage with the tour guides and really get the quality of
right.
So I know that's had some rewards.
Okay, giving thanks. All right, brothers and sisters, we are here. Auntie Afyong is here. Bonchi Ayete is here. Shakara is here. If you would like your question read out, if we have time a little bit later on in the show, we will open up the line so that brothers and sisters can come live and interact with our guests. But for now, if you would like, if you have a question and you would want it read out, please at gotkushTV. So you must at gotkushTV so I can identify the fact that you want your comment or your question read out. If you don't do that, I'm just going to assume that you're talking to somebody in the chat. This just allows me to differentiate between those who actually want their comment read out and those who do not. And of course, you are at liberty to super chat as well. And you know that will ensure that I see even louder and larger. All right, brothers and sisters. Okay, let's get into. I'm going to share my screen now. And we're going to start at the beginning. On this day, in the year 1957, the nation of Ghana was declared independent. And there's a lot of things that we could say about the nature of independence at that time. You know, I don't think there's a nation in the Caribbean or Africa that was made independent without a significant number of contradictions that we can identify. However, in the case of Ghana, it would be safe to say that, sorry, brothers and sisters, I'm having some issues here with my screen sharing. Just give me a second to sort this out. It would be safe to say that some significant pronouncements were made that have made their way through the annals of time in terms of their significance to us as African people globally. And we're going to begin at the beginning with probably the most famous statement that the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah ever made, which was made on this day in the year 1957. And so it goes a little something like this. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the liberation of the entire African continent. My technology is taking a while. Here we go. Our independence is meaningless unless
mind you.
That's right. With the total liberation of the entire African continent. Auntie Afyong, what does this statement mean?
I mean, it's so powerful and so prophetic. It's so unreal, you know, because until today, it continues to have a significance that somebody was able to see, you know, that no single country on the continent could achieve very much without the rest of the continent. You know, I've been thinking of a very simple analogy. It's like your house is on fire, and then somebody is just trying to save your own bedroom. That's the kind of narrow mentality that, you know, the vast majority of African rulers have, and even Africans, us. You know, that your house is on fire and all you think of saving is your bedroom in that house, thinking that if you save your bedroom, you will be okay. The house is going to collapse. Now, Nkrumah was able to have that kind of foresight at that time. And that's why he's a prophet, because he was able to look into the future. And, you know, for him, the future was so physical. It was so real. You know, it's so spooky. Just talking about it, even today, 60-something years later, that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. All the other, you know, leaders were just focusing on the little, you know, territories and how they could be, you know, better errand boys to, you know, imperialism and the colonialists. But he was able to look into the future. It's that looking into the future. You know, let me say something. You know, when Christians say Jesus died for me, when Christians say Jesus, you know, he died for me. Yeah. Nkrumah literally died for us. Certainly me, when I'm talking Afyong, that's how I speak to myself, that this is somebody who laid his life down for you and not even know you personally, but try to prepare a future for you. That's what Nkrumah was talking about, because he could see the nature of imperialism, the nature, and he could see how things would be today. There's another thing he says, Shakara, that when I was living in London, we used to discuss that a lot. He says that unless night, that we will be slitting each other's throats and the colonialists will be laughing, and that's literally what has happened to us. That graphic thing he says of slitting each other's throats, it also ties into his prophecy and his vision about Africa. So for me, it's just it's very spooky as somebody is able to look into the future and have such clarity about it even before it begins to manifest. That's what it means to me.
Thank you for that, Auntie Afyong. Anything that you want to add, Bunchy?
Yeah, Auntie has truly said it all. That same feeling, or that same prophetic feeling that I was describing to you when I read Neocolonialism, the level of clarity. Imagine the hype and excitement of the day. Nkrumah and his country had won the World Cup, combined with every election possible, combined with the dreams of their life, like this freedom, all of this. And he didn't just sail on that. He didn't just lose himself in all of that. He was able to keep his mind on that material reality that said, yes, this is all great. People are celebrating me. People from all over the world are here giving me fans. But I have to remember what the core objective is, and the fact that this will be temporary unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the entire African continent.
Thank you for that, Bunchy. Let me just stay here for a second, a little bit more, because I think people may underestimate the importance of vision and being a visionary within the context of a liberation movement, right? It's very difficult to envision what is not yet there and envision solutions to problems, because oftentimes the solutions that you're envisaging can be seen as counterintuitive because they're so out of step with what is the current of the day, the current of the time, and just to bring us up to date, in terms of an assessment, because Auntie Afyong, you just touched on this a minute ago, but let's delve into it a little bit deeper. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the entire African continent. Now we're going to bring it up to date, but what did Nkrumah do? Yes, what did he try to do, Auntie Afyong, to see this vision come to fruition? This liberation of the entire African continent, and inspire others with this vision and to organize around this particular vision. What were his actions in attempting to achieve this?
Now, you can imagine, on that day during the celebration, that Ghanaians would have just been, extremely happy for Ghana, and that pride about Ghana, that, wow, we did this and it's us. It's all about us. For somebody to have the courage to attempt to burst that balloon on that same day, in that same time, that's something. Because I tell you, if you try that, even today in Nigeria, we're just talking about our thing, leave us for a minute to even enjoy ourselves. Stop talking about other people. That's courage. But it was a courage of a man who saw the future. That's number one. So in saying that, he was speaking to different audiences. He was speaking to the Ghanaian audience, his local audience. He was speaking to the rest of Africa. He was speaking to the Black world, and he was also putting the imperialists on notice that this fight is only round one, and there would be as many rounds as we needed to regain control of our continent. That's what this speech was about. It was a notice to the world. Now, to Ghanaians, starting first of all, he was telling them that we're going to have to open up our country. We're going to have to open up our land. We're going to have to open up our minds. And you know, till today as we speak, that's why Ghana continues to be a Mecca and a Jerusalem for all other Africans. Because whether Ghanaians like it or not, their country already has that tradition. They already have that culture. They already have that history of having other Africans on their land. And they're quite receptive, you know, to that, generally compared with lots of other Africans. But it's because they have had that from day one. So that's part of their culture. That's become part of their tradition. These are powerful things to achieve, you know, to win over a people's psyche, to win over their minds at such an early stage. So that was number one. Number two, he was letting the other Africans know that Ghana was a liberated zone that would and could be utilized and was open for all the other parts of the continent, you know, to come and utilize in order to fight, you know, their battles, you know, for against colonialism. That was the message that, and that message went out loud and clear, because all the other fighting forces, all the other countries that were seeking independence, you know, just immediately gravitated towards Ghana and, you know, under Nkrumah. So these are powerful things in tactics and strategy and propaganda and warfare and nation building. You know, this man was just something else, you know. And it also put the imperialists on notice that, you know, gaining Ghana's independence was just like, you know, it wasn't even round one, you know, it was just the beginning, and that there would be many, many more to come. And so that's how he did that. He put that information out, and it immediately began to bear fruit, because all the other liberation movements just started gravitating, you know, to Ghana. People would come for advice, for assistance, for solidarity, for legitimacy, you know, for just lots of different things from all over the world, and the Black world, including the Caribbean. You know, so that was the essence of that, and these are some of the concrete things he did. And of course, you know, like, you know, he actually opened up a part of the government bureau of I think it was called African Affairs, you know, which was specific, you know, to all the other liberation movements, you know, and made Ghana open. Basically, you know, would give accommodation and facilitation, you know, to all the other Africans, you know, and he actually prepared a space. So he didn't just talk about it. He actually did it. He legitimized it, you know. The other interesting thing he did, which he did more for himself and his own mental stability, as he took over power, he quickly invited other African, you know, warrior scholars, you know, people who had been involved in the quest for independence, to come and live in Ghana. Now, that's a very strategic move. Why? Because he quickly sought to surround himself with a particular type of mentality, a mentality that would allow him to continue to remain as a freedom fighter and not sink into and degenerate, you know, to become a nationalist like Nnamdi Azikiwe did. And like any of us would fall into. Once we return home to our countries, we immediately become immersed in the local and petty politics, you know, that we find ourselves in. So from being a Zik of Africa, you know, Nnamdi Azikiwe quickly degenerated into, you know, you know, Zik, not even of Nigeria, you know, of you know, his own part of the country. So I'm saying that Nkrumah deliberately surrounded himself with Pan-African warriors, scholars, intellectuals, and strategists and tacticians, to continue this fight. So these were very practical things he did along this line of maintaining Ghana, as a space, for African liberation from day one. And of course, everything Ghana had, armed forces, the economy, schools, government, access to government, every single thing that Ghana had was made open and available to all other fighting forces on the continent. Yeah, that's what it did.
Thank you, Auntie Affiong. Bunchy, anything you want to add? It appears Bunchy has frozen. Or is it me that's frozen? Brothers and sisters, oh no, it's Bunchy that's frozen. Definitely Bunchy that's frozen. Okay, brothers and sisters, we're gonna get back Bunchy in a second. We are here discussing the achievements of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. This is our Ghana Independence special, and as I said earlier, we should always contextualize the fact that whenever we celebrate our independence days, the question always becomes, how independent are we really? Maybe we'll get into that a little later on, but for now, we're just detailing the achievements of the man. And I always think it's important to do so because our Pan-African history is mired in narratives of failure and quote unquote dictatorship and so on and so forth. And very rarely, most people that know the name Nkrumah, that know the name Amilcar Cabral, that know the name Namzama Madikizela, Winnie Mandela, that know the name Marcus Mosiah Garvey, often know very little of what they achieved. Yeah, and so I always think it's important to detail these things. And Nkrumah is a particular case study in this instance because of the fact that he was at the helm of a nation and a nation state, and the first, in fact, as far as Black Africa is concerned, to achieve its independence. Yeah. And so, Bunchy, the question is just looking at the practical steps that Nkrumah was taking to achieve the goal of a liberated Africa. What was his strategy and, his tactics, and just adding anything that you want to add to what Auntie Affiong has shared so far?
Once again, Auntie has just said, she said so much. As she was right, I was making some notes when you first asked the question, and I was just, as Auntie started talking, I just started crossing off. Okay, she's conscious. She's mentioned that. She's mentioned that. She's mentioned that. But it's actually, when I go back to the first comment that she made, this is why Ghana, the practical steps that Nkrumah took. The answer to this question, to asking, is a direct correlation to that initial question about the significance of Ghana's independence. I had a conversation in a group chat a few months ago about why so much is made about Ghana's independence. We weren't the first African country to gain our independence. And then somebody in the group chat said, oh, well, we're the first Black African country. And then somebody said, well, no, actually, Sudan went independent first. And of course, Sudan, we know, has a big Arab population, but it's still majority an African country, still a Black African country. Some might argue that anybody who's not Black there, but that's a whole other conversation. But the point is, this is what we're talking about. It was the spectacle that Nkrumah created around independence. It wasn't just, okay, we've got ourselves in the door, we've slid in, let's just start managing in our little silo. Everything he did was constantly about reaching out to other African countries. There was the conference, the Conference of All African Peoples Conference, let me say, sorry, in 1958. Now, this is one of those things, and I'm glad about what Auntie said earlier, talking about her dad and that feeling that he had, because we very often, even as students of history, we forget to think about what something would have been like in that time, in that context. So I'm glad that we have that kind of really felt, lived reality of Auntie's dad, how he felt with Ghana gaining that independence. Because then, today, African conferences are very common. Speaking for myself, I see some form of conference involving one or more African countries at least once a month. Sometimes it's about agriculture, sometimes it's about tech, sometimes it's even about politics, but it happens all the time. We're used to it. that was unheard of in 1958. People were like, what? I mean, you're talking about a time when people within the new country of Ghana were still getting to know our new neighbors. We're still getting to know who are these people in this place called Ghana that we're all now part of. And then all of a sudden, there was a whole All African People's Conference with people from all over the world, all over the continent, and yes, all over the world as well, coming and meeting and saying that we are inspired by you. Some had gained their independence, the Northern African countries that attended, and some were yet to gain their independence. The likes of Amilcar Cabral was there. Guinea-Bissau had yet to gain its independence. We know Lumumba was there, and what we today call DR Congo was yet to gain its independence. And some argue that that was actually the radicalization of Lumumba. Before Lumumba came, he was, just another kind of set to be Belgian puppet, but kind of really meeting fellow Africans on the ground in Accra in 1958, and what independence really should be is what really got him riled up to say, okay, no, this is supposed to be something real. And so, yeah, to transfer ourselves to that element, that felt reality with fellow Africans and so forth coming from all over the world to meet and discuss. And then, yeah, to go to what Auntie spoke about, the African Bureau and what that involved. Similar to the conferences, it also involved the training and help and upkeep and so forth of people from yet to be liberated lands. We know that Nelson Mandela was in Ghana during Nkrumah's era. We know that Mugabe was here. In fact, Mugabe was here and he taught. I believe it was the Western region, it was the Central region. I think it's Western region. His wife was in Ghana. He actually, he got married while he was here. And so there's a lot of examples of that kind of proximity to Ghana's independence, this access to all kinds of radical materials that would have been once again new. Today with the internet, it's nothing to get radical books, whether PDF or mailed to your house or to find out where they're being sold. But we're talking about a time when people didn't have access to all kinds of books that spoke to what their individual countries' history was and so forth. So that was big. I understand that Che Guevara was even in Ghana. I'm yet to confirm that. There's supposed to be a picture of him out there. So that kind of thing. It wasn't just Africans, but revolutionaries of all types that came. Another step. I don't know if you wanted to get into that now. Was the things like the Mali, Guinea, Ghana compacts.
Hold that one for a second. We'll come back to it. Yeah, we'll come back to it. But the one thing I do want to touch on the Wiji Bunchy, because we're gonna just stay in Ghana for a second, and we're gonna go on to some other matters. Yeah, but one of the issues that people talk about in terms of Africa nowadays, a very popular caricature, is the issue of tribalism. And in Class Struggle, Class Struggle in Africa, he details the difference between tribalism and tribe. Yeah, in fact, I should have actually brought up the section. Maybe I'll do it in a second, right? And read it to you all. But was there an issue in terms of, because Ghana has a number of different so-called tribes? Yeah, we prefer to say nations or people groups. And to what extent was Nkrumah able to nullify the antagonism, yeah, across so-called tribe, and what were the challenges that are associated with doing so? You're on mute, Bunchy.
This is something here that I should I can speak to, but I want to get some specific research to get the names of the specific items in play. But let me just speak in broad strokes right now. Mm-hmm. So for instance, there was agitation manipulated and amplified by the West, of course, for secession. In the time, I think basically every independent state had this to deal with. You had ethnicity, nation that felt, okay, before independence, we were on our own. All of a sudden, these borders have come, and now we're independent. We want to go it alone. Now there's once again, there's another conversation that is a whole conversation in of itself. But my issue with the secession movement is always that it was always balkanization. There was never a case made for seceding that was going to contribute ultimately to African unity and our emancipation, whether political or physical. It literally was, let us weaken ourselves in order to just for ego and nationalistic pride.
Right.
Would take nowhere. So there was that in Ghana, and then so what happened then? You had political movements allied to that. So Nkrumah passed a law, and this is where I would like to have the details on hand. Nkrumah passed a law to say that no, there were to be no political parties based on ethnicity, basically. I'll try and get the information for that. What year it was passed. I don't want to make up any numbers. But yeah, so those examples like that around the tribalism piece, and like you said, he wrote about it. That's a big deal. We're talking about what Nkrumah's Ghana was supposed to be. To write a book in Nkrumah's era was not a book that was going to sit on the shelves of intellectuals and academics to ponder over and to teach other academics or students. Nkrumah's books were to have that direct contact, whether it be by the propaganda vehicles that he had touring Ghana, the radio broadcasts that he had going on. So when he wrote about tribalism and class struggle, this was something that was going to be disseminated to the grassroots for people to understand how tribalism was, and its attempt was being used against them. And as Afyong mentioned, yes, it wasn't. It was nothing new for people to move. When you look into the history, especially of West African peoples, there's a lot of migration. My people, the Ga, are said to have come from the sort of Nile Delta area, Sudan, Egypt, down through Nigeria, Benin, into where we now are in Accra. The reason why Ghana is called Ghana is because the majority of the country are Akan, and the Akan descended from people that migrated from what today we call now the sort of Senegambia, Mali area, and that was called Ghana at a time as well in history. And this is mass migrations that took place, and we came to find people on the land, and there was that sort of conversation and meeting of minds. And so tribalism, I think the point I'm trying to make is that tribalism has always been transitory, and there's always been far more significant examples of unity and collaboration and cooperation than there has been conflicts, where the conflicts have been temporary and passing, and then of course Europeans and their manipulations making some of these tribalism things more impactful and more noteworthy than they should have been.
Right. Understood, Bonchi. Thank you very much. Auntie, I was going to move on to another question, but if you have a contribution on this one, please feel free to bring it forward.
I think that, obviously, as a new state, so to speak, he was bound to inherit, a lot of the contradictions, which colonialism had obviously suppressed, The truth is that, like you rightly said, these are not tribes, we're nations, of people that have been, put together, under forceful circumstances. And I'm not talking of the countries in which we find ourselves today, So, for example, the Yorubas, you find them in Nigeria, you find them in Togo, you find them in Benin, you know. So they're a nation, they're spread across what we call countries, you know, today. And same thing is with the Hausas and, you know, lots of different ethnic nations. So obviously when, you know, independence began to come, you know, they would attempt, or those attempts, you know, for that agitation to sort of go back, you know, to their status, you know, to their pre-colonial status, so to speak. But then the reality had changed, you know. It's the difference between, you know, how, you know, if your children live in an area and it was a safe space, and then if some lions now begin to live, you know, in the outskirts of your area, your strategy had better change. And so, you know, with the coming into contact with, you know, enslavers and imperialists, it meant that that freedom of, you know, everybody, every nation, you know, every little nation stay on their own. We can't afford it today as Africans. That is the reality. And a lot of people have still not come to terms with that reality, that we are faced with a monster that we're obliged, you know, to get together, you know, in order to survive, you know, that monster. So there were those issues, you know, and of course, a lot of them were also instigated to destabilize the new nation of Ghana. But, you know, he knew what it was about, you know, and he was very clever, you know, with that. One of the things he did, especially for the younger generation, to make sure that, you know, they were not as, you know, that consciousness of, you know, our, you know, of those tendencies was not so much in the generation that would come after, was to ensure that all the schools in Ghana, especially the government schools, which at that time was most, if not all, that people, you know, children were going to different parts, you know, of the country. So you would, in whatever school you were in as a child, as a young person, your boarding house, you know, friends from childhood would be Ghanaians from different parts of the country. So they, and you know, that was intentional, you know. So now you have, you know, the kind of ethnic consciousness you have in Ghana is very low compared to the kind of vicious forms it takes in a country like Nigeria. You know, it's vicious in Nigeria because of the seeds that were sown by the so-called founding fathers, you know, during independence. But for Nkrumah, it was the complete opposite. His intentionality about curbing, you know, this thing, and he was more concerned with the future than he was with the present, you know, because he knew, you know, that time passes very quickly, and it's who would rise, you know, up to be. So there was that, you know, but obviously all over the continent is still something we grapple with because of the experience of slavery and colonialism, that our nation states, our original indigenous nations, you know, have been blurred, you know, now. And, you know, people are forced into countries really that have no meanings, really, you know, because like me, when I say I'm a Nigerian, what does that mean? It means that I have the consciousness of, what's the name of that idiot who named the country Nigeria? Somebody, you know, the governor, the colonial governors.
Lord Lugard and Lady Lugard.
Yes, you know, lady, whatever her name is, that's what it means, you know. And then, you know, so if I hold that consciousness, say, oh, and then when I say I'm a Nigerian, it means that I'm a Nigerian to the extent that the person who is a Ghanaian is not a Nigerian. You know, this thing of, oh, I'm Nigerian, you're Ghanaian, is such a false consciousness.
Yeah. Auntie, are you finished? That was a sharp ending. I feel like it was cut short there. Okay, brothers and sisters, it seems that we may have a disturbance in the force. Yep, there we go. So Auntie will be back on shore with us shortly. All right, we're gonna move on, brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, Auntie wasn't able to finish her point there, but we'll surely get her back in a second. Let's go on, Bonchi, to some things here. So a few pointers in terms of Auntie is back. Auntie, would you like to finish your point?
What happened? The link dropped me off. Sorry about that.
The CIA happened, Auntie. Don't worry about it. You know, I saw the thing go. Go ahead. Finish your point. But
anyway, so I was just saying we have false consciousness. You know, this national boundaries, and these national identities that we have today, they're completely false. But anyway, let me stop there. I don't know if, I've answered that bit before you go to the next thing.
Thank you, Auntie. All right, we're gonna go on to a few pointers now. I spent some time on that one, longer than I actually intended to, but I think it's an important one. Yeah, in general, we'll probably come back to it shortly. But on the education front, so bearing in mind now, Nkrumah's government, as far as presidency, lasted from 1957 to February. From March 1957 to February 1956. Yeah. And so 1966. Don't worry. All right. And so that's the time frame that we're talking about. Yeah, it's very important that we put all of these achievements in that particular time frame. Well, as far as being the president of Ghana, because there are achievements that relate to after that particular time frame as well. Okay. All right. So education instituted free education from primary to tertiary university, including textbooks and other resources, made education compulsory up to secondary school, built hundreds of schools across Ghana, over 1 million new school places, including 11 technical colleges, 47 teacher training colleges, 3 new universities, a mass adult literacy program, bearing in mind, in fact, let me not extemporize. Let me just read. Yeah, mass adult literacy program. Granted free scholarships for Ghana students to study abroad, especially in subjects of science, technology, medicine, law, and engineering, and increased the wages for teachers and university lecturers from between 50 to 100%. I feel like the unions in the UK would appreciate an Nkrumah presidency at the moment, because all of them are striking at the moment in relation to their low pay as it stands. Auntie Affiong, anything to highlight in relation to achievements in relation to Nkrumah's education policy?
It was clear, that we were coming from one of the things. I don't think that generally people appreciate how what's the word I want to use? How underdeveloped, those centuries of slavery and colonialism had made us. It's a terrible thing. It's really terrible. Apart from the fact that it destroys the psyche, so he's having to build from -000, not even from level 1, and he could see, he realized that education is a key thing, building back our confidence, our capacity, and our ability in a lot of things to be able to run our own societies. So, for me, it's not even so much the number of schools, but, the fact that this were done within such few years. That's something, because even now, how many years later, check the records, whether in Ghana or in any of the other African countries, you don't have this type of progress within, X amount of years. They just don't have it. We just don't have it because we have neo-colonial, rulers. So it's just the vision, but you see, it's one thing to have vision. The capacity to activate and manifest that vision is a completely different thing also. And he was also blessed with that, to quickly bring things into fruition. Because I think that one of the things with him, though, and it's not everybody that has that, he realized that he was working against the clock. He knew that they were going to take him down. He knew that. Every day he lived like it was the last day. So he was working. He was an intense character, terribly intense. His secretaries would receive calls at 2 a.m., wanting to find out, where is this file? Where is this? Where is that? 3 a.m. And he expected you to be, on hand, to have all that information at your fingertips. So he was working against time. And that's why he was able to do so much in that little time, But really, it was about the vision. That's what you call nation building. He actually tried to do that. Now imagine, and this is the only thing that I have a little bit of pain about. Imagine if Nkrumah had been the president of a country like Nigeria. I'm talking about the amount of resources, the population, the geography, the everything. Africa would have been a different story, even if he had just been president for those short amount of years, because the seed he would have sowed, because Nigeria, because of the population, we have industrial capacity.
Right.
You know, a small country, even if you industrialize it, which he tried to do, will still be limited, you know.
Right.
So I'm just saying, you know, he was just something else, really. He was something else. Let me just leave it there.
We're going to come on to that industrialization point, definitely, shortly. So stay tuned, Auntie, for that one. Go ahead, Bunch. Anything you want to add on this particular point?
Yeah, once again, Auntie has really said it all. Let me supplement it more to say that the thing to remember about education, and this is, you know, this is kind of like what I wanted to bring into the conversation to really make it relevant to today, is that it was all purpose-based. Auntie mentioned about vision. Nkrumah had a vision. Education, unfortunately, is one of the most weaponized words in the Ghana context right now, because it's just education for education's sake, absolutely no purpose in mind. And it's just, oh, you're educated, you've got a certificate. Like, there's absolutely, that's cruel. There's very little correlation made between education and the function you're supposed to serve in society to make society better. There's just no correlation. So any attempts today, and there have been, at the free education thing, because there is no purpose in mind, it collapses, because it's supposed to be an exercise in getting children's certificates. So there's so many examples of people trying to subvert it and all of this. These technical colleges, 11 technical colleges that there were then, I would like to know how many there are now, because technical colleges are massively stigmatized in Ghana now. You go to, there's one not far from where I am now, around the ministries area. I think I may have taken you there, Shakara, to do some printing one time.
Yes, I remember.
Polytechnic. That's the old word for it. It's a polytechnic. It's not a polytechnic anymore. When you mention polytechnic, they're offended. Oh, technic, poly, you know, it's like they want to be considered as a, you know, standard or traditional, let's call it, university. And unfortunately, that is a product of what I'm talking about, because there has been no conversation around function. If we had real conversation about what technical universities are supposed to do, that this is where we create our engineers, this is where our technological people are arising from. Unfortunately, the technical thing is demonized. And so now we have people with paper degrees, and all they can look to do is, you know, go the migration route or hope on a government job, because we don't know how to do things, build things. So import is out of control and all of this. So this is the example. So sometimes when the only time people are able to compare Nkrumah's achievements, and an example of it is this education thing, is by just putting the stats next to each other. What you can never compare is the function, the purpose that Nkrumah had in mind, able to achieve with his things, you know, such as education, and other things we'll be discussing.
Okay, give him thanks, Bunchy. Give him thanks. So I'm gonna move on slightly. I want to just say, emphasize the point that Bunchy just made, and put it in the context of the fact that one of the biggest issues that our nations have, quote unquote, post-colonially, is educating and undereducated people. You have to remember that we're talking about colonization. The colonizer was not interested in educating the masses of the people, right? So in order to run a nation, to have the expertise and so on and so forth, read how Europe underdeveloped Africa, for example, and you will see how the people were robbed of agricultural knowledge and its application in a scientific manner. Yes. And so all of these things led to the underdevelopment of our nations on the continent and in the Caribbean, and the undereducation of the majority of the citizenry. Yeah. So to solve the problem, now most people that are looking at, because we are so confined by frameworks developed by neo-colonial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, we don't look at education and investment in education as key to the problem-solving agenda of any nation coming out of colonialism, right? We're not taught to look at it in that way, yeah. And so we often get caught up in metrics that metrics that are designed not to consider factors such as those. Yeah, within that, there is no global standard and study that is designated for a nation coming out of colonialism, if that makes sense. Yeah, what they do is they superimpose the developmental stage of foreign nations where they are at upon the nations that are decolonizing themselves, and they tend not to look at templates from other nations that are actually decolonizing from a self-reliant perspective, yeah, in terms of what other nations should do. So I'm just pointing that out for students of economics and politics out there, that most of what you are taught would not take into consideration these dynamics, yeah. And unless we have an education that does take into consideration these dynamics, then we are being miseducated, quite literally and fundamentally, brothers and sisters. And so let us go forward in relation to, so that's important. Yeah. When you look at the fact that, and like, for example, I forget the nation, you know, but colonizers weren't really building schools like that. You know what I'm saying? So to build, and they, because their schools were catered towards, the schools that they did build, like Achimota and so on and so forth, were catering towards educating a minority elite. It wasn't geared towards the masses of the people, yeah, and so the masses of the people remain undereducated in that regard. So investment in schools and education is entirely important. We're going to move on to one of the more hyped conversations and talked about, but also controversial ones as far as the Nkrumah legacy is concerned, and that is the area of the economics, yeah. And so we note here that Nkrumah created, well, not Nkrumah, but Nkrumah, the government that was led by Nkrumah, created a balance between the agricultural and industrial development, agriculture, modernization, and diversification, with emphasis on subsidized farming. Subsidizing the farming is basically paying for the cost of production, which is basically what all developed quote unquote nations do. Yeah, so for the farmers that operate in their country, their nation, the government tends to foot the bill of production because the cost of production is exponentially high, and so farmers are often unable to manage it if they are going to be able to live as well as produce. And so governments often subsidize farming. It's done in the UK, it's done in America, it's done in France, and a number of other nations in the quote-unquote developed world, which is the reverse is the case in the quote-unquote developing world, or we might say underdeveloped world, you know what I'm saying? And therefore, and the production yield from this and the living standards reflect that fact, yeah? And so we say emphasize on subsidized subsistence farming as opposed to cash crops, yeah. And the difference is that cash crops are produced primarily for the sell to others, the outside world, generally speaking, Western or quote unquote developed nations, yeah. And that is what colonization and neocolonization reduces African nations and to, yeah, cash crop economies usually based upon one crop, right? And in Ghana's case, it was cocoa, which goes into our chocolate and other produce, yeah, or products. Okay, and then we have industrialization. Over 100 new industries and numerous factories were built. Yeah, so Ghana, between 1957 and 1966, was in a position whereby it was producing glass, it was refining sugar, it had a textile printing plant, chocolate, meat processing, radio assembly, printing plant, which I've mentioned that twice for some reason. Matches, shoes, nails, as in like, you know, for carpentry and them kind of things there. Sweets, soft drinks, alcohol, cigarettes, biscuits, paints, yeah, canned fruits, insecticides, insecticides and other chemicals. Huge investment in public and cooperative sector. So that means that the sector that was funded by the government, but also local cooperatives among people groups, yeah, and a significant percentage of foreign investment in the private sector was to be allocated to the welfare of the Ghanaian people, yeah, and so we have a combination of private and public sector funding in this regard. The key issue here is where that was being directed, okay? And so anything that we want to add here, Bonchi Anyete or Auntie Affiong? Either one of you can go first. You're both on mute. Oh, Bonchi, you just came off mute, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if Auntie would go off mute to let my elder go first, but we're going on mute, so I said, okay. Yeah, I mean, this is again, I think this is still impressive, actually. This is not one of the things that can sort of be shrouded by anything happening today, simply because it's not happening today. Exactly as you are saying, and as Auntie had said, the level of underdevelopment that Ghana was in is always massively underrated or ignored outright. You had a situation where literally every individual, their only function, apart from maybe feeding themselves and their family, and that's a distant second, was extraction for Europeans. That was the number one purpose for and I used the word, I was about to say citizen, and I used that advisedly. And that was their entire function. So these industries that were being created were like the education piece, like the Pan-African moves Nkrumah were making, like independence itself and the languages. All of this was new to people. Not only the existence of the industry, but once again, the purpose that Nkrumah had in mind to be trading amongst themselves and other Africans and adding value to what they were creating. This is one of the conversations that are always get interesting when you're in Britain. You're talking to European leftists there, because of course the European left and the whole union movement came out of factories, and it's not discussed enough that those factories were processing things that were extracted by force or coercion, colonial criminal tactics in the African continent, Asia, and of course South America as well to a degree. And so before they can start talking about whether they're getting paid fairly, you have to talk about the fact that all the raw materials that they are using there are products of theft. Now, of course, as employees themselves, they, where they can be held culpable or whatever is another conversation. But the fact is, their employment is contingent. Their employment is contingent on our exploitation. Because if we were able to add value the way Nkrumah was trying to with these industries, when you see the list of the enterprises Nkrumah created, not only is it impressive for its length, it's impressive because of their absence today. That still today, 67 years after independence, we haven't been able to recreate a lot of those enterprises that would take place. And so when we hear about this sort of subsidized farming, people think, okay, so this particular crop, okay, that's good for food, and it's good for some export to countries that don't have it, but what else? Because people are not thinking in terms of value addition still, and that's what Nkrumah had in mind. Nkrumah was looking to add value to tiger nuts, he was looking to add value to sisa, all kinds of fiber, there was very few commodities existing in Ghana that Nkrumah wasn't looking to add value to make sure that there's multiple layers extracted for the benefit of the African peoples before they left our shores or before they hit the shells of fellow Africans, whether within this edifice we call Ghana or further afield. So yeah, that's all I need to add. So once again, to keep in mind the vision, the function, and what this would have looked like to people that had not heard anything like it. All roads led to the ports. Nkrumah had to create roads in order for people to face each other and say, yes, face each other, travel to other parts of this country, not to on European orders to oppress your brothers and sisters, but to trade and to go and study and things like this.
Giving thanks, Bonchi. Giving thanks. Auntie Affiong, anything to add on this point?
Yeah, it's so important that we, when we're speaking about Nkrumah or even any any of our people, our freedom fighters, that we attempt, and I use the word attempt deliberately, we attempt to locate ourselves in their time, at that time.
Right.
Remember that at that time, because of the, centuries of capture by the enslavers and the colonizers, we literally saw white people as God, literally. And for a lot of parts on the continent today, we still see them as God, literally. So for somebody to come and chase away these people that look like gods, and unmask them, unmask them, unravel them, delegitimize them, and make people see them for what they were or what they are at that time. That was something. And then to then begin to attempt to rebuild, a spirit of confidence in us. Even that confidence, you see that the confidence of Nkrumah's time, we don't have it today. That's that can do spirit, we don't have it today. We've regressed. So at that time, to now tell people that apart from chasing them away, all the things that we thought they were doing, because even till today, you hear some Africans saying, there's so much corruption and, disorganization in societies. Let the white man come back. That the white man was so organized and intentional in everything he did. Let him come back. So at that time, imagine Nkrumah doing all these things to tell our people that we can feed ourselves, we can clothe ourselves, we can do all these things, we can provide for ourselves. We don't need the white man to do these things. That is the essence of all those factories. Because even a lot of our people, for lots of different reasons, we still see white people as our saviors. Parents who live in the diaspora, they see them as their parents because the societies, So that thing, and Gavi was another person who had that to try and smash that illusion, or delusion we have about white people and say, no, we need to, when we have an image of a savior, when we have an image of doing for self, that image must be an African image, not a European image. So that's what all these factories were about, that we can actually feed ourselves. We can do for all the things that the white people had been doing in our society. We actually could do it for ourselves, But so it was difficult, but that's what he was trying to do, But first, before you do a lot of these things, the first place you need to heal is the mind. If the mind is not healed, it doesn't matter how much technical skills and capacity a person has. If the mind is not healed, it will still revert, back to, whatever. So for me, that's what I add.
Give thanks, Auntie. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. All right, what I'm gonna do now, because there's a few more points that we could go to, but let us go to the comment section. Brothers and sisters, if you want your comment or your question read out, please at gotkushTV. If you don't at gotkushTV, I'm going to presume that you're having a conversation in the chat. So please at gotkushTV if you would like your comment or your question read out, and we're gonna go to a few comments from those who have done that already. Melaman is asking, what is the indigenous name for Ghana? Any of our guests wanna address that way?
Ghana, well, maybe, I mean, Ghana is an indigenous name. It's the name of another place, just like the brother said earlier. So it's not it's not a European name, so to speak. So Ghana itself is an indigenous name. And what people need to realize is that any country in Africa today is made up of multiple nations, that is prior to coming in contact with, the enslavers, this period of slavery, when multiple kingdoms, empires, different spaces. So Ghana itself is an indigenous name, and Nkrumah changed that, from the Gold Coast, which the colonizers had named that space, Gold Coast, because there was a lot of gold to be found there, as and the neighboring country called the Ivory Coast, because there was a lot of ivory to be found there. He changed it, he renamed it, to Ghana. Now, this is a situation that you hardly have. Look at a country like Nigeria. We're still trapped with the same name that the criminals gave us during colonization. And we still hold on to that. Nobody has had the courage to attempt to revert back, to a more indigenous name. So Ghana itself, was an ancient empire. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead, Bonchi, if you had an addition to this question.
No, I think Auntie definitely pretty much has that covered. The nations that make up all our previously traditionally colonized countries, now neo-colonized. We had our names for our respective territories and so forth. But yeah, as far as the edifice that is today Ghana, it didn't exist before colonizers made those borders. Put those borders up, so of course there wouldn't be an indigenous name for those lines, because those lines are not ours.
Certainly. Brothers and sisters, just a quick historical point. The ancient empire of Ghana, which was also known as Ouagadougou, was situated in and around where Senegal, Mauritania is today, around that region. And it is said that some of the people that now reside in Ghana migrated there from that region. There are debates in history about whether that's exactly the case or not, but that's the narrative, and that's why Nkrumah chose the name Ghana. There's also a debate about the name Ghana itself, and so there are some who would like to say that, well, the name Ghana comes into popularity in history because of the Arabs that wrote about the empire. So some people have extrapolated from that the name Ghana itself is an Arabic word or an Arabic name. And that is disputed by many others, because Ghana was said to be the name or a title for rulership in the Ouagadougou Empire. And so the Arabs who wrote about the empire call it Ghana, if that makes sense. That's the idea. But there are those who would suggest that the actual word Ghana is a name from, I believe, the Soninke language, but I'm not don't quote me on that last part as far as the language derivation. All right, so just pointing that out for historical context where that is concerned. We're taking your questions in the chat, brothers and sisters. If you have a question or a comment, please at gotkushTV, so I'm aware of that which you would, sorry, of that excuse me, brothers and sisters, of the fact that you would want your comment read out or your question read out. So we're taking comments as well as questions. Feel free to bring either. All right. Let me see. Setimotep says, holding my breath for a 4-hour stream today. Really benefited from the guest perspectives at gotkushTV. Well, I'm not sure if our guests have 4 hours to spare. You know what I'm saying? If they do,
it's not even about that time to spare. It's like, do you have 4 hours in you? You know what I mean? Do you have the 4 hours in you? And what kind of quality discourse are you expecting at close to midnight? Especially on something like this. This is not something you can half bake through. This is on very serious sort of scholarship and recall.
After 1 p.m. in close to 1 p.m. in Nigeria. Nigeria is an hour ahead of us.
Yeah, exactly. I always forget that.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But when the guests will go for as long as we can. I usually do around 2 hours. We're 15 minutes from that mark at the moment, and so we'll probably do some overtime. But whenever you need to go, let me know, and we'll wrap up the thing. All right. But give thanks to Imhotep. You know what I'm saying? Always a powerful supporter of gotkushTV, and we appreciate your presence, my brother in Trinidad. We have a question from Coffee Campbell, who asks, which non-Western country you see as being closest to your liberated ideal? I'm reluctant to take this question, not only because it's not really what we're talking about today, but I'm going to allow it. Is there a country in today's world, Bonchi, Anyete, and Auntie Affion, that is closest to your liberation ideal? And he's asking specifically for a non-Western country. I'm not going to prejudice your answer by exposing where this question comes from. Just feel free to answer it in any way that you see fit. Yeah, it's not. Either one of you can go first.
Okay. I couldn't see the mute on Auntie's image.
No, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Auntie's still muted, so go ahead.
Yeah, that's definitely a weird question. Because it presupposes that basically what the question is asking that which contradictions can you live with? I think is what the question is asking. Because there's no ideal nation, Western or non-Western.
But he's asking. Sorry, just to clear, he's asking is closest to. So yeah, I would have answered it the same way you're about to in terms of from an African perspective. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
It's saying liberated ideal. So I guess I don't know if I'm gonna get myself into trouble by saying like Cuba, in the sense that this is a population that have been very much educated on what the West represents. When there's been so many occasions that the full might, not just a couple of assassins like deal with African countries, but whole platoons of American soldiers have landed on their beaches, trying to force them back under American exploitation. And because of how they have been educated at a national level, the people themselves have been able to, first of all, with the education, know where their interests lie. That's the first part. And then be motivated to be able to also, form, paramilitary groups in order to combat it. So in that sense, as far as the liberated ideal, I very often think about what would have happened if Nkrumah had created or been able to create the Ideological Institute earlier, in which he was able to send. That was the plan, and he had a few generations of teachers, bureaucrats, to go to this place, receive ideological education, and then take it back with them into their families, their places of work, until the rest of their colleagues could also experience the same. In which case, then when this reactionary coup took place, it would have been a different response. Understand.
To be fair to Nkrumah, as you know, I know you're not saying this, but Castro had decades to build up that level of ideological fortitude.
Yeah, that's true.
And have it manifested in the military. There's a lot that we can learn from Cuba, though, in terms of their capacity to withstand foreign, in particularly American incursion. So I'd agree with your point in terms of the lesson that we will learn from them in terms of, or from that example in terms of that. Would you want to go any further with this, Bonchi? Nope. All right, cool. Auntie Affion, do you want to answer this question or not? No, feel free to not if you don't want to. It's not on the subject.
It's always good to engage. First of all, Nkrumah was a first, quote unquote, trying to walk down that path. So he didn't have the privilege, of experience, that lots of other people have. That's number one. Now, in 9 years, you know, he's trying to correct almost 500 years. You know, how far could he get? That's number two.
Yes.
Now, number three, because of how long it had been, the psyche of our people was so deeply damaged that he had to do a lot of work. One of the things that he did not realize in time, because he thought he would hit the ground running and try and do things. But if you do not have the people's minds, that preliminary work had not been done, you're going nowhere. And that's something that, you know, some of us have that benefit of experience that he never had, you know, that he wasn't privy to. Because if the Ideological Institute had been set up from the get-go, from day one, it would have been a slightly different, you know, situation. But he tried to do things, to get things done. But get things done by who? If the mind is still aspiring to be like the oppressor, which is what neocolonialism, that's the essence of neocolonialism, that those who have taken over from the colonialists aspire to be exactly like how the colonialists, you know, were. That tells, that's the mind, that the mind is still trapped, you know. So with all the best intentions in the world, you know, people will only go as far as their minds will go. So you can have an Nkrumah as the head of government, but you don't have Nkrumah in the population, you know, because we're still worshiping, you know, other people's gods, and we're still looking up to other societies, you know. Now, coming to the question itself, I would also have to agree, you know, that Cuba would be the nearest. But that's because Fidel had enough time to work on his people's minds to let them know, you know, the essence of imperialism. That it's you know, it's a demonic trait. And you know, look at how when, you know, the Americans invaded, you know, the Cubans fought back to the person. You know, that's something, and that's a consequence of the mind. That he had been able, you know, Fidel had been able to transform their minds, you know, to see the imperialists as enemies. If today, 2024, the Americans invade Nigeria, the country will go up in jubilation, you know, that God has sent them to come and save us. You know, so it's the mind we're talking about, you know. So that's the answer to that, but it must also be contextualized. You know, and that this type of work, even what you're trying to do with your panel, is essentially, you know, the political education and conscientization of our people. Look at how difficult it is. If we said we were discussing, you know, Michael Jackson or P. Diddy or, you know, some other thing today, oh my God, there'd be a flood. But you're Ghana. Oh, please, people have better things to do. Let me leave it there. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Auntie. I like I said, I was reluctant to take the question because it's a bit of a diversion from the conversation at the moment, and also because I know where the question is coming from in terms of intentionality, but we won't allow that to taint, you know, positive interaction in general. Scattered Minds, big up yourself, Scattered Minds in the building is asking the question. Big up gotkushTV. Can you share a bit about Nkrumah's philosophy? What will Nkrumah and thus Nkrumah is be calling for in the coming Ghanaian election? What is the Nkrumah manifesto? Lord of mercy. Scattered Minds has asked a question that could be the whole show. However, having said that, let me just take a brief commercial break, at this moment in time, you know what I'm saying, just to let you know, brothers and sisters, about, you know, one of our shows that we got, you know, on gotkushTV at the minute. You know what I'm saying, you need to know about this if you want to get a more in-depth answer to this question throughout Ghana. Democracy under fire, delving deep into the political theater of Ghana in the lead up to the general election in December 2024. We welcome activist, organizer, and writer Bonchi Anyete as our regular co-host and analyst, breaking down the dynamics in his unique and entertaining way. Tune in to our very first show, Decoding Ghana's Political Theater, Tuesday, the 27th of February, 2024. from 8 p.m. GMT, live on gotkushTV. And we look forward to you joining us every 4th Tuesday of the month throughout 2024. Ghana, democracy under fire. This is a show not to be missed. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters. Myself and Bunchy and Gete are hosting Ghana Democracy Crazy Demonstration of Crazy Demonstration. Democracy under fire every 4th Tuesday of the month from 8 p.m. in the lead up to the Ghana election. We are going to be breaking down the historical and contemporary politics and political economy of Ghana and delving into questions such as the one that Scattered Minds has just asked, brothers and sisters. Yes, indeed. And the question is, can you share a bit about Nkrumah's philosophy? What would Nkrumah and thus Nkrumahist be calling for in the coming Ghanaian election? What is the Nkrumahist manifesto? And I'm going to throw that question to Auntie Afyong first.
I'm not sure that I'm in a position to answer that. I was just laughing, when I saw the question. Because I was going to ask Bunchy, CPP there, are they still around? Because I sort of lost touch, with things. Maybe you should lead on this,
Well, I tell you what, Auntie. If you lead on the Nkrumah's philosophy part, and then we'll allow Bunchy to continue on with the CPP analysis and the election manifesto.
I mean, basically, Nkrumah's philosophy was about self-determination, for Ghana to be its own state, to be a genuinely sovereign state, So Nkrumah would be turning in his grave, looking at, the type of country that we have today. The question of the economy, that the Ghanaian economy is still tied, to the apron strings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And that essentially, is still a colonial, it's still an economy, caught up in colonialism, as it were today. That, the forces, productive forces, are not, from the land itself. So it's just the complete opposite of, what you have. And Nkrumah would be fighting, to have those ties cut, to Ghana, for Ghana to be run, by Ghanaians, for Ghanaians, and with Ghanaians. Instead of the situation, you have today, where it's just, things are up in the air. So it really hasn't changed, and it's a new colony, that's what Ghana is today. It's a new, different type of, a new type of colony. But the essence, it's funny, Shakaram, even though we talk about neocolonialism, at the end of the day, the global world economy is still operated as a colonial economy. Where they get things from one part of the world in order to build up another part of the world. And Nkrumah's work was to bear those, those ties of dependency. So it hasn't changed. Nothing has changed, really. And that's the tragedy. Even after 60-something years, Ghana is even backward than it was. By the way, I mean, and we can't, there's a limit to what we can discuss today. The one thing that trips me about Ghana, just if you ask me for one thing, do you know that Ghana had nuclear technology? Ghana, nuclear technology in the 60s. Ghana had nuclear technology in the 60s. Let me just put that out there, and people can go and do their own research and investigation. Imagine the vision that would make somebody, create nuclear technology at that time. Imagine, if that continued, where we would be today. So let me leave it there while he contemporizes.
Thank you very much, Auntie. Go ahead, Bunchy.
I like the way Etta said that. Let me set him up. No. It's a good question. I remember somebody. I can't remember how the exact wording of it. So I guess I can just make it up now. It's not a proper question if it can't be answered with a whole book. And that question, I think, the questions we've experienced today, that would. I mean, not only would it be a whole book, but fortunately for me, there actually are books So depending on, your level of interest, Scattered Minds, and definitely for the benefit of those who are listening to this live and who will be listening to this posterity, there are books. That's one of the benefits. That's another great thing that Nkrumah did. We've been quoting from Nkrumah's books, forgetting to mention that they too are accomplishments. The fact that this man wrote, making sure that there would be, reducing the amount of, debate there would be about what he represented. So, as Auntie said, there's no need for us to put words in my spiritual grandfather's mouth. He wrote enough books that captured what his philosophy is. First of all, it's an actual literal book of philosophy, conscientialism, which myself and Shakara were discussing earlier. So if you are brave enough, Scattered Minds, by the name of your your profile name, I feel like you could maybe handle conscientialism better than mine. It definitely takes taking a part of our mind and then rebuilding it to really get into conscientialism. And then you've got specifically where it comes around a manifesto. There's a convention. People actually saw the book today. I actually had to look it up. It's funny because I saw it just a few hours ago. Convention People's Party Handbook from that era, to really see what Nkrumah had in mind for a political party, functioning in the era that we've just been describing. So, of course, as Nkrumah is today, our role would be to look at that book, analyze it across the modern context, just like we do with all these other books. Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare that my comrade mentioned earlier as well. All those kind of things. Like, what do the contents of those books mean for us today? And then you've got books that you can talk about in more general terms. The autobiography, Nkrumah's autobiography, is very important. Very 100. Important. This conversation, I'm grateful for that, hasn't been about dispelling the stigmas or myths about Nkrumah. But if it had been, the very much of what he said in his own autobiography dispels much of what people had to say about him. He speaks about Marcus Garvey being one of his inspirations. You didn't even need to go far. The man put the black star on our flag, and on our crest. What do you call those things? The crest that goes on front of the passport.
Coat of arms, I think it's called.
The coat of arms, that's it. The coat of arms thing, and then as well as a lot of our liberation monuments. So that was the kind of respect that Nkrumah had for Marcus Garvey. Somebody else who, gratefully, because of his wife, I sometimes get scared when I think of what would have happened if we didn't have Amy Garvey capturing the UNIA stuff. It looks like Garvey was just all action. Fortunately, he had his wife capturing it for us today, because a lot of people would have had all kinds of things to say about what Garvey was if we didn't have philosophies and opinions out of UNIA. So we've got that as well, and we've got Nkrumah's own books that capture what he was about. Africa Must Unite, and Africa Must Unite is an interesting thing, but of course Africa Must Unite is a very macro statement. So people would then say, okay, that's Africa Must Unite, that's like the big picture. But then there's something that I don't know if you'd like me to call him a historian. He wrote a book on history about Ghana called Oxford Street, about Accra specifically, I should say. Ato Quayson, he teaches at Stanford, in the west coast of America right now. And he has this expression called horizontal archaeology. Horizontal archaeology. There's probably other terms for it as well, apart from horizontal archaeology. But let's take the expression Africa Must Unite. Realistically, what does it take for Africa to unite? So yes, it's a macro statement, and our first picture goes towards these borders we're talking about, either going or somehow political unity past the borders ever. But actually, what does it take to create a population of populations for Africa to unite? It takes education. It takes, we know that Europeans are not going to let us have it easy. So it then takes a place where we have the economic might to then back up a military defense system that will withstand a possibly the biggest onslaught the continent has ever seen. And Africa has seen a lot of onslaughts. Would follow Africa, or meaningful attempts for Africa to unite, or the industry we're talking about, which goes in towards the economics and so forth. So yes, it's a big comment, but it's a big expression. But if we're able to take it horizontally or vertically, whichever way you look at it, to say, okay, what does it take to get there? What would the rest of the society need to look like in order for Africa to unite? You can see what you need to of Nkrumah's philosophy and what a manifesto to get us there would look like. Yeah, thank you.
Giving thanks, brother Bonchi. We're gonna go to another question here, in the chat. There's more, achievement talking points to get through, in the brothers and sisters, but we won't get through all of them today. But I'm gonna prioritize your comments and questions for now. We have an interesting one from brother Talawa, which says, what role should and can indigenous leadership systems play in the liberation of continental African countries? What role should can indigenous leadership systems play in the liberation of continental African countries? I wish I invited a man by the name of Nana Nketiah V to this conversation. Yeah, he'd given a whole.
He's my favorite traditional ruler in Ghana, hands down, without any prevarication, without any hesitation.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has the answers to this question. And I should say this before handing it over to our guests. It's a very powerful question and a pertinent question, given the extent to which indigenous African leadership systems were co-opted by the colonial authorities. Yeah. It's an entirely important question because it presents some challenges and some contradictions at the same time, especially for one who is a self-proclaimed African-centered one like myself, right? So we would privilege our own indigenous institutions, but then we have to contend with the extent to which our own indigenous institutions have been colonized. Yeah. So, Auntie Affiong, how would you answer this question? What role should and sorry, I should also say that all of our revolutionary leaders, to a significant degree, had to contend with that reality. Yeah, the extent to which our indigenous leadership systems had been co-opted, yeah, by the colonizer, the criminal colonizer. So, Auntie Affiong, how would you answer this question? What role can indigenous leadership systems play in the liberation of continental African countries?
Well, you see, first of all, that's the whole point, that and colonization, almost wiped out, our systems, and what they didn't wipe out in their original forms, they completely corrupted, and took over. So what we have now, so we have the forms, but not the essence of what, things were and how they were. So there is that, and we mustn't be romantic at all, because a lot of things we're going to have to try and go back, like the song says, going back to my roots. We're going to have to look like the Sankofa bird to go and see how things were before we came into this traumatic contact with, these enslavers and colonizers, because they've really corrupted, not just corrupted, they've also corroded. To corrode something is to destroy it from within. When something is destroyed and infiltrated from within. So a lot of the institutions, the indigenous, institutions we have today have been, that has happened. And then the new
looks like we may have lost Auntie there again.
Man.
I know.
I was really enjoying her submission.
Yeah, MI6 is real, Bunchy. You know, that's the thing.
Over there. They're working overtime. They just won't let us pray. It's really crazy.
While we wait for Auntie Afiyong to return, do you have an addition to this question?
Yeah, I do. It's sort of a book of a question, isn't it? Okay, it's always interesting when the question about traditional rulership comes up. I never know if I should sort of speak in sort of generic African terms or if I should center my own nation story. Oh, Auntie's back.
Wait, Auntie's back. Okay, Auntie, feel free to finish you cut out for a second. Feel free to complete.
Okay, yes. Yeah. So, and I was just saying that in terms of, so just to quickly say just one thing I want to say in terms of the role, that, they're supposed to play.
Hey. I'm summoning Ogun. Yeah, I'm summoning Ogun right now. Yeah, Orisha of internet.
That's true. I didn't consult before. Just move. I'm moving to somewhere else now. Anyway, I was just going to say that in the real world, in what they call real politics, there are only two social systems to contend with. We really don't have much of a choice. A lot of us like to romanticize, how the world is. And you find that, today, a lot of our indigenous systems are actually pro-imperialist. Even some of our spiritual systems, they don't want to wage war against this enemy. Well, that's as the systems as they exist today. They've adapted to the world. So even some of our spiritual systems don't want to wage war. They want to accommodate everything and anything. So I just people, the way I like to just state in a non-confrontational matter is there are only two social systems in the world today. It's like if you want to travel to somewhere far away, let's say if you want to travel from Africa to China, there's a limited mode of transportation, walking is out of it. I don't know if I've lost you again.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. So they're just two social systems. You have to choose, between that. So maybe I should leave it for now, since my network is going in and out. But just to say that those who want to be involved in the in the liberation, of the continent, have to immerse themselves in the reality of how the world is and which are the forces that we battle against, and not to live on romance, so to speak. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Auntie. Go ahead, Bunchy, if you have a contribution on this question.
Yeah, I was going to say that depending on sort of the texture and tone of the conversation that I'm having at any given time. When the conversation about traditional rulers comes up, I never know whether to speak in terms of the general African story around our traditional rulers and how they were co-opted by colonialism and Europeans, or whether to center my own nation story. And I think because Auntie has really covered that general conversation around what happened with our indigenous leadership systems, let me go into mine. So I'm a Ghana, part of the greater group, the Gadangbe. We are today found around in the Greater Accra region of Ghana. Now, actually, this is something that actually you'll find some guys that don't know this as far as our history. We were originally a theocracy, what is called a theocracy, in the sense of we talk about democracy, we talk about autocracy and all these other kind of things. But we're a theocracy, that is our priests were our political leaders. Our priests are today called Wulome. Anybody that's been to Ghana or seen images of them, these are uncles, usually uncles. Sometimes some of them are young, some of them are nephews, but usually they're uncles. All dressed in white, and they are always barefoot. These were our political as well as spiritual leaders. The transition from them to what we call what is often translated as king. But in our language, manche means land father.
Yes.
Or manye, land mother, was purely down to European manipulation.
Yes.
We know generally across European commentaries themselves, they didn't like the spiritual figures as far as where they're dealing with Europeans. It was said that it was part of the Christian guys. Oh, you know, we're Christians, we cannot, you know, sit and have communion with people that believe in, the general terms that they would have used. But of course, we know that many of these men weren't actually Christians at all. So the Christian thing, and in the case of some of our East African, North African brothers, and the Muslim thing was just a pretext, simply because, of course, our spirituality is so important to Africans. And so it was essential that they sideline our spiritual figures, whatever it took to do that. And they did what it took to do that. So the land fathers, land mothers, they existed as a leadership system, but they were very transitory. When you read some of the books about their roles pre-colonization, it reads like a project manager. It really is like a project manager. There was a function that needed to take place within the Gadangni kingdom, and then a manche or a manye would be nominated, would be set up for the role of accomplishing that operation, however long it took. Keeping in mind also that there was a lot of migration. And then on top of that, alongside manche manye, there's a lot of other leadership roles that it looks like there was very little difference in. Jase, Mankral, all these other kind of things. But the Europeans came and they said, we want a secular leader. And not only did they want a secular leader, they wanted somebody that was hereditary. Why? For obvious reasons. They wanted somebody that they could corrupt. They could take their children away, take them to the Etons and Oxfords of Europe, so that they would come back and look on their own people with disgust and, oh, I've been to England now, I've been to Holland now, I've been to Denmark now, I've been to Germany now. This is not the way civilized people go on. This is what I've been told civilized is. And then from there, you've got your agents, and you've got a whole family line of agents, all the way down to today. So to go back to the question, that is the kind of like some of the history on it. Now, I wouldn't be a Pan-Africanist if I didn't hold the utmost optimism for revival and recuperation of all African systems. And that includes also our leadership systems.
Yes.
If I can be a revolutionary, I'm a writer, I'm in enterprise. So can somebody who is of the political of the traditional leadership class. You follow? So and we have examples. You've mentioned Nana Nketia of the Western region as well, and we do have revolutionary traditional rulers who not only reject the economic systems and exploitative legacies that sometimes their families have carried for hundreds of years, but also are very vocal about this rejection and about how we all need to reframe how we look at everything as Africans. So yes, it is possible for traditional leadership figures to take a role in taking Africa where we need to go. Sekou in Guinea, Conakry, was descended of what we call royal lineage. And I think there's a couple of other examples like that. So to be a traditional leader yeah, I'm going to say, regardless of how your family has been sort of corrupted and used previously, you can become revolutionary and make sure that you don't exploit people in that way, and you become a leader, and look to totally reconfigure those political figures and how they interact with the masses to our oppressors and create new systems and so forth. So I hope that answers the question. Myself.
Giving thanks for that, Bunchy. You know what? I'm tempted to go in on this as well a little bit, based upon my experience in Ghana, having visited Kumasi for the first time, and happened to be visiting Kumasi during Akwasi Daye, which is the festival, during which the Asante Hene, the king of the Ashanti, is paraded through the streets of Kumasi, along with the Queen Mother as well. And it, on the one hand, you see a lot of beauty in terms of the preservation of certain traditions and what they actually supposed to represent, and on the other hand, you can very much see the impact of colonialism and neocolonialism even manifested in the traditional setting. And that's not to offend any Ashanti watching, even though I'm an Ashanti descendant. It's just the truth from a revolutionary perspective. There's so much I could say, even visiting the Manshia Palace, whereby which is the palace of the Asante Hene, and the museum, whereby you get taken on a tour guide, and basically half the story that the tour guide is telling is about the Ashanti with resisting the incursions of the British into Ashanti land. But then the first image that you see when you walk into the museum is a picture of Atunfo Nana Osei Tutu II, the Asante Hene, standing alongside King Charles. Yes, the British monarch. That's the first picture you see.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
I'm telling you. No, to the point whereby I had to tell the tour guide, I said to him, look, if I went to Buckingham Palace and walked through the door, the first picture that I'm going to see is not going to be a picture of King Charles standing alongside Otunfo Nana Osei Tutu II.
No Africans.
I said to him, these people are still colonizers, and this man should not have this level of pride of place in this space. Yeah, the whole tour guide. I spoke to my brethren, my new friend who took us there. After I said to him, the half the tour guide was talking about how the Asante Hene was resisting British colonization, and how Queen Mothers unseated Asante Henes who refused to stand firm, right? And we walk in the place, and the first thing me see is this boy. I said, better you put up. Literally, I said to him, better you put up a picture of Atunfo Nana Osei Tutu II alongside Awolome from Accra as the first picture that you see. Yes, when you walk inside the people in palace. You know what I'm saying? So these are all kinds of the contradictions that we have to go through, brothers and sisters. But like I said, I'm gonna curtail myself because enough things we could say upon this subject. You know what I'm saying? But in fact, let me save that part for another day. All right. Well, I will say this. My brother who was chaperoning us around Kumasi did make a statement to me that to a significant degree, the Ashanti today envision themselves as allies of the British. Allies of the British. All right, brothers and sisters, we're going to be wrapping up soon. I don't know how long Auntie Affiong has, but I know Bunchy has to go soon. So we're going to be wrapping up. We have another question in the chat. Oh, by the way, let me just say this. Sorry, on that last question, there's a book called by Nana Nketiah V on the subject, actually, called African Culture in Governance and Develop, the Ghanaian Paradigm. African Culture in Governance and Development, the Ghanaian Paradigm, which does go some way to answering that question. And also there's a PhD thesis by an now ancestor from Congo called Kimbwanden de Kiabonseki Fukiao, called Digging Up the Past. And I'm forgetting the subtitle, but it's about similar subject, governance, and so on and so forth, from the traditional Bakongo perspective, and solving the problems that the nation of Congo was experiencing at that time, which was the 60s and the 70s. So let us see. Let's get one more question in from the panel before I know the guests have to leave. Kushti, where's Kushti's one? She had one. Hold on a second. Sorry, Kushti. There we go. All right. Question is, what, if any, goals which did not get to transpire would any of the family on the panel have loved to see manifest, and what would it have been in their opinion? Yeah. So once again, what, if any, goals which did not get to transpire would any of the family on the panel would have loved to see manifest, and what would it have been in their opinion? I know what I would say to this question, but Auntie Affiong, which of the goals did that Nkrumah was not able to see transpire would you have loved to see manifest? Just pick one and bring it forward.
It's just one, and that's what it was about. Africa must unite. Just one. One.
Yeah. All right, understood. I had to keep it short and sweet. That's all. I was going to be more specific than that, but go ahead, Roger. Let me see what you say.
Yeah, I really like that comment. Yeah. Not only I'm not, I'll try to be as punchy and say, I think literally what we spoke about earlier, the education piece.
Right.
Africa United would have been definitely the big win, especially with all that entails, as I spoke of earlier. But with the education piece too, and what Auntie was also saying, which she added to the submission, is that having an ideologically as well as educated population means that you're always good. Whatever happens next, they can take the baton for you and make sure that even if there's a slip up, the agenda continues. So for me, it's got to be about education. My role with the EFL, Economic Fighters League in Ghana, is the head of the Education Bureau. And for me, it's education. So then whatever happens next, you have an educated population who are working from the same compass, very clear on their interests, very clear on their enemies, very clear on how they have to be learning and unlearning and relearning and so forth. You have a population that are in the safest of hands, their own. So yeah, for me, it would have to be education, secondary.
Do you mean education or conscientization?
Okay, yes, conscientization, because I did say about the ideological element, but yeah, let's go with conscientization in that sense of having the ideological base so that whatever you learn passes through that filter. Yeah, so yeah, conscientization works for me. Yeah. But education, the way I see it,
it would be a beautiful thing.
It's misused. Yeah.
It will be a beautiful thing if the education system, the formal education system, caters for conscientization on a mass scale. That would be an ideal scenario. I'm going to answer this question. I haven't really answered another question. I'm going to answer this one though, and I'm going to answer it with by highlighting another achievement, that we could put under the Nkrumah government, right? But it's an achievement that didn't get to manifest in the way that it should have, and that is the Akosombo Dam project, and my answer really is Auntie Affiong's answer, but because she's already said it, I'm gonna just embellish on it a little piece, right, and bring something else to the conversation, so it's as we say here, despite attempted sabotage from Britain and America, under the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah's government, the Akosombo Dam in the Volta region was built. This dam was designed to provide energy for domestic and industrial development, exploiting Ghana's vast mineral and agricultural resources, gold, diamond, etc., etc., etc. The idea was to harness Ghana's full industrial and agricultural potential. Had the Akosombo Dam vision been fully actualized, not just Ghana, but a significant portion of West Africa would have been the first industrial nation with a renewable energy source as a significant, possibly primary power supply. Yes. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting that and relating it to what Auntie Affiong has just said, it would have been interesting to me to see the role that the success of that project, yeah, because given the fact that it was about an energy supply, and the varying different applications for that kind of energy, and if you read the works of Nkrumah and Marcus Garvey and Sheikh Anta Diop and so on, industrialization was a key problem that they were trying to solve, yeah, in terms of being able to generate and develop a nation, but also being able to protect the nation as well. And so it would have been interesting to me to see the role that the success of that project could have played in a unifying process, the unifying process of the African continent, yeah. And that is to say that the dam was completed, but Nkrumah was overthrown a month after the dam was completed. And so after he brought the dam to fruition, 2 years ahead of schedule, by the way, it fell directly into the hands of neocolonial puppets, yeah, in the region of Ghana, which relates to a conversation that we were having yesterday, because one of the points that I didn't get to make yesterday, because we were talking about the cocoa price and Ghana versus Cote d'Ivoire. And the nation of Ghana between 1960 and 1980 and 1982. And a statistic was given about Ghana's prospects, economic prospects in 1982, as though Nkrumah was still the president in 1982. Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966. Yes? So but by the time you get to 1982, the majority of that time, as far as presidency is concerned, as far as government is concerned, has not been Nkrumah in power. The majority of the time was that Ghana has been a quote-unquote independent nation. Neo-colonial puppets have been in power, controlling the development of the nation. Bonchi, I know you have to depart. Auntie Afyong, do you have to depart as well? Auntie, you're on mute if you're speaking. Okay. But we'll come back to Auntie Afyong. Bonchi, give us your final word, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've really very much enjoyed this conversation. I've made a lot of notes. I'm looking forward to inserting stuff that we kind of like left off the bone and insert them into our podcast. And so yeah, whoever's listening to this, please, I hope you're hitting your likes and sharing as well. We'll return to what you think we haven't dealt with today. And do them justice in future conversations, definitely. So I hope I've done the conversation as much justice as you can in 2.5 hours on a Wednesday evening. But yeah, we'll return to it and definitely give it even more due attention in one form or another.
Giving thanks, Bonchi. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and if you're partying tonight, enjoy.
No, sir. No partying for me. All seriousness.
Have a good evening, bro. Have a good evening. All right, that was Bonchi Ayete, brothers and sisters, member of the AAPRP, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which was declared and initiated by the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah in the book Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. He's also a member of the Economic Fighters League. He's also a novelist and writer. And during our podcast, because he's at the moment trying to republish his latest work called Red Ants, which is about a British the story and narrative about the British bombardment of Accra during the colonial period, and it's entirely powerful story. Though I haven't read it in its entirety. I've only read a snippet of it. But yeah, necessary. Brother Bonchi is a brilliant brother, a very brilliant mind. And so I look forward to you getting to know him more and more as we continue. Auntie Afyong, are you still with us? Hey. So Auntie Afyong is with us, but still muted. If you're speaking, Auntie, you're muted. It's still muted. Okay, Auntie Afyong, once you're back with us, let us know. Give us a signal and we'll come back. We'll come to you directly. Let me just check any more comments in the chat. So I read that one already. Let me see. Anthony says, gotkushTV, peace and blessings to the panel and to the chat. Happy Ghana independence to all our Ghanaian family. And he also says, peace and blessings to our great sister. I love her analysis. Listen, yeah, may I tell you this? Yeah, I had the pleasure of growing up in the Pan-African community in the UK with Auntie Affiong, and you know, learning a whole leap from her in terms of Pan-Africanism, the conditions of Africans on the continent. You know, debates between her and my father regarding nationalism and socialism and all them thing there. You know, you learn a lot, yeah, from the uncles and the aunties and the parents in the community. And so I truly give thanks. And I've said it before, and I say it again, Auntie Affiong is one of my favorite people in the world. And so, you know, whenever she wants this platform, it will be open to her. And we're just glad that she's able to join us today. Auntie Affiong, you still with us? Okay, Auntie's still muted. Yeah, I'm not sure what is going on here. All right, brothers and sisters. So what I'm inclined to do, yeah, is just share a few more. Like I said, yeah, now there are criticisms for everything, you know, and there are caveats and contradictions and things that could have gone better. And you know, there's a day that we'll be able to go deeper into those things, yeah, you know, in more depth. All right. The issue for me is that a lot of people don't know a lot of the information that we're sharing today. And if you have learned something from today's conversation, give me a black power fist in the chat. If you've learned something new in today's conversation, and before we are able to critique our ancestors, our great leaders, our great movements, it's best for us to understand and know what they did. There are many forces out there who have a vested interest in us not knowing what those like Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah achieved. Now, I am a Garveyite. Yeah, I am not a Nkrumahist, strictly speaking. I have great respect for the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, just like there are many Nkrumahists who are not strictly speaking Garveyites, but who have great respect for the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And there's a whole leap that I learned, yeah, from the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. And there are some things that I critique about Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, just like there are those who are Nkrumahists that have things that they critique about the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. But there's a lot that these two great men and the movements which they led would have agreed on and harmonized with. Yeah, and we want to raise the awareness of those things, our audience's awareness of these things, because when we get into the differences and the critiques on both sides, then you will be able to understand those differences even more and be more qualified to take part and understand and listen to the conversation. So we're not getting into that today. Yeah, we're not even getting too much into critiques that Nkrumahist have of Nkrumah. Yeah, there are some criticism that Nkrumahist will have of Nkrumah. Yes, as well. You know what I'm saying? You know, things that may have could have gone differently or should have been done differently, or with the benefit of hindsight, we could have said, well, he maybe should have made this move or so on and so forth, right? Yeah, we you know what I'm saying? Just like sometimes, you know, we don't always go into critiques that Garveyites have of Garvey, yeah, you know what I'm saying, and the Garvey movement and so on and so forth. There are many, many critiques on either side of this dynamic, yeah, that we have to address and deal with and so on and so forth. Again, however, being able to understand those conversations properly requires us to actually highlight, just give our people the understanding of what these great movements in fact achieved. And knowledge of these things is low, and there is a vested interest on the part of the geopolitical order as it exists today, that we don't look at the legacy of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah in terms of achievements, that we can only look at it in terms of failures, that we take a white colonial Western viewpoint of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. And we never discuss, for example, we see white people, white nations, and white ideologies as our perpetual saviors, where the truth of the matter is the fact that our following and our aping and mimicking of Western imperialist power structures and their ideologies has resulted in the greatest amount of failure. in majority black nations around the world, continent and diaspora. Yes? I study tingo. No make nobody fool you. Me say no make nobody fool you, no. When they bring you white Western ideologies, political and economic, and give you the West as an example of success, look at the levels of failure that exist in those same ideologies as they have manifested themselves on the continent, in the Caribbean. One of the fallacies that they promote is the idea that most of the nations that went independent in Africa were socialist nations. It's a false narrative. Yeah? The overwhelming majority of them were fully 100% within the capitalist mode of production. And whether one adheres to capitalism or socialism or not, one should be able to identify that fact, yes, and not buy into false narratives masquerading as truth. But the reason why they do this is to because those like the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah was in fact a socialist, they put out that narrative to deter us from looking at his legacy. And one does not have to adhere to the ideology specifically, yes, of socialism in order to recognize the achievements of the man. And that is what we're doing today. All right, brothers and sisters, and we're doing that without apology. We're now beg no friend to engage in this conversation and this discourse. Yeah, okay. We are not apologizing to anybody for any of these things. All right, Auntie Afyong, are you with us? Okay, Auntie Afyong seems to be having some significant problems. Yeah, Auntie Afyong seems to be having some significant problems. All right, brothers and sisters, I'm gonna continue. We're gonna wrap up the show, okay? So let's to come through with the rest of some of the things. Them, so we haven't got major points on this one, but the housing, there was, many houses built throughout the nation of Ghana. That's a significant problem today, especially in Accra. Transport built hundreds of miles of new roads, including motorway, also miles of railways, and airline, Ghana Airways, the Volta and Tefel bridges, shipping harbors, town development, Tema project, and all these things. Now that what's the word? One of the things that is not known about Ghana is that Ghana completed a motorway before Britain did. Yeah, the Tema motorway was completed before the M1 in Britain was completed, and that motorway was built with concrete, and has not needed many when I went in 2015, I went on the motorway with Bonchi, who was just with us, and he was informing me about the fact that that motorway had not needed any significant repairs since the time it was built, which is 1960, 1961, up until now. Or up until then, let's say. All right. So he built new towns, for industrial development, and all the foregoing provided employment for the Ghanaian people. There's more that could be said on that fact. There's more that we haven't even gone into the CIA intrigue and so on and so forth. We could, I'm saying, we've touched on it, we've alluded to it, we haven't gone into details because we just want people to understand the kinds of things that Nkrumah did. I'm going to bring up another document. Auntie Afyong, are you with us? Auntie seems to have disappeared. All right, we're persevering and we're going to wrap up soon, okay? I'm going to stop sharing this one and open up another document. By the way, I will take some comments before I close. So at gotkushTV, if you would like your comment read out. At gotkushTV, I haven't seen any new at gotkushTVs, but if you would like your comment read out, please at gotkushTV, and I will definitely read it out. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna do some overtime with you, brothers and sisters, for this conversation. All right. So the ones that we've dealt with already. So I've already dealt with subsidized the agricultural sector, developed hundreds of new industries, huge investments in public and cooperative sector, dealt with that already, dealt with the Akosombo Dam, reservoirs were built. And by the way, there's a couple good documentaries, yeah, on the Akosombo Dam project on YouTube. You can watch them, all right? One is called Black Power, a history of the Akosombo Dam. And then the other one is called, I'll tell you in a second, but it goes into more the process, how they had to negotiate with local leadership in terms of, because they had to build, new lakes through people's towns, yeah, communities, and so they had to negotiate with local leaders and how they went about doing that, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it also touched on actually how a lot of the plans for recompense in those communities were never fulfilled because of the fact that Nkrumah was overthrown. Yeah. So yeah, reservoirs are built to increase the water supply to towns and villages, as well as the irrigation of agricultural land. Built hundreds of miles of new roads, including a motorway to connect Ghana with itself and Ghana to other countries in West Africa. The Accra to Tema motorway was built using concrete. The motorway has not needed any significant road work since it was built over 60 years ago. And I've already mentioned that it was completed before Britain completed the M1. Right. Initiated the Ghana-Guinea-Mali Union, which we haven't gone into today, yeah, what we could. But it was a union. This was another practical step that Bonchi kind of mentioned towards moving towards a union of African states, yeah. So the Ghana-Guinea-Mali Union, Ghana, headed by Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, Guinea headed by Sékou Touré, Mali headed by Modibo Keïta. Yes, this union was the basis from which to get rid of the colonial borders that still imprison Africans and develop a larger economic as well as social critical mass. He also signed a secret agreement with Papa Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, in which Lumumba agreed to join this union. But they kept that secret because they understood, the neo-colonial incursion at that time, and so they wanted to build up the strength of that union, that particular addition to the union, before announcing it publicly. With the wealth of Ghana, Guinea, Mali, and Congo combined, as well as the revolutionary trajectory of its governments at the time, Africa would have been well on its way to being a political and economic superpower in the 1960s. Nkrumah put out the call for Africans in the diaspora to return home to Ghana. When Omowale Malcolm X visited Ghana in 1963, he secured an agreement from Nkrumah for him to support liberation movements, the liberation fight of Africans in the Americas, as well as to forge a meaningful unity across the diaspora. Nkrumah granted free scholarships to Africans from other parts of the continent to study in Ghana. Nkrumah played a key role in the development of the Organization of African Unity, though from a revolutionary perspective, the Organization of African Unity was a massive compromise, given the fact that most of its leaders were not revolutionary, right? Most of the leaders in the Organization of African Unity were very, very neo-colonially minded, yeah, which is, again, why that most of the nations after independence didn't pursue socialism, yeah, in that kind of way. They were all in the bed of France and Britain, and for the most part, yeah. And then America, who was the fastest growing neo-colonizer of that period. It did bring many of the leaders together in order to push for the decolonization of the continent and forge operational unity across colonial borders. So the Organization of African Unity was founded in 1963, and at that time, a significant portion of the continent was still colonized. And so whilst Nkrumah was about to walk out, yes, of the discussions around the forging of the Organization of African Unity, one of the things that he was able to do was influence it to the extent that the organization itself agreed to work towards the decolonization of the nations that were still under colonial rule. Yeah. And so there's more to be said on that, whole heap of contradictions in that story, but we're not going into that today. In 1965, Nkrumah wrote arguably his most important book, we've mentioned already, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. In it, he basically prophesied how the former colonial powers would attempt to recalibrate their stranglehold on the continent. In this and later texts, he details how we can organize to release ourselves from this stranglehold. Today, the condition of Africa and the majority Black nations around the world can clearly be understood through a reading of this book. And I don't underestimate, though I can't understate that I can't overstate that enough. Yeah, that it is really essential reading. And when you consider that he wrote that in 1965, it's a madness. A year after writing this book, so Nkrumah wrote this book published the book in 1965. A year after writing this book, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown in a coup orchestrated by America in the form of the CIA and Britain in the form of MI6. Nobody has been able to match his government's rate of quote unquote development. And I put development in brackets because I'm actually saying that even by the metrics of the global economy as it stands, as designated by America and Britain and the IMF and the World Bank and so on and so forth, Ghana has not been able to replicate growth and development, even according to those metrics, since the time of Nkrumah. Yeah, since that time. All right, that's the point I'm making there. Yeah, so we can, analyze and critique and so on and so forth, but it's important that we know all of these things as well. Now, it's also necessary to note that whilst today we have development metrics, that are significantly put out there by again, so most of our majority black nations now follow the dictates as far as development is concerned of the IMF and the World Bank, and this was imposed during the 70s and the 80s, in particular. All right, and if you study the work of economists who are willing to be honest about these things, they will tell you that the growth of many African nations and nations in the Caribbean between the 60s and the 70s was not too far off the growth rates that were being experienced in many other parts of the world. It wasn't too far off. The great disparities, began to grow in the 70s and the 80s when the IMF and the World Bank policies began to be imposed and taken on more and more by varying different governments and under varying different circumstances. And another day we'll go into that even more, but it's just to highlight again the extent to which it's important for us to study this period of our history and know Wagwan, because there are many who would seek to distort the thing and have us continuing to run down the dictates of the IMF and the World Bank and those who write the policies of those institutions. And they have never worked. We have 2 generations, whereas Nkrumah lasted for 9 years in Ghana. We have the history of 1966 until now of abject failure under these British and American policies to go on, to realize it doesn't work. It never has worked. It never work. You know what I'm saying? And all of these things. Auntie Affiong, are you with us? Last time we're going to try this. If we don't get it now, then we know that Auntie Affiong is not with us. All right, so we'll close the show. Okay, that's that, brothers and sisters. It appears that we don't have Auntie Affiong, so we're going to move on, and we are going to just quickly check what if there are any @gotkushTVs in the chat. If I don't see @gotkushTV, I'm not going to read your comments. So you've got about 2 minutes to get an @gotkushTV in before I close the show. All right. So once again, if you would like your comment read out, please @gotkushTV. I'm only seeing one. Kushti's asking, so all this was achieved within 9 years. All of the achievements save all of the books. So a lot of those books were written before 1966. Some of them were written after. So like Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare was written after 1966. But all of the achievement that we discussed today took place between the years of 1957 and 1966. And this is why I don't take people who want to rubbish Nkrumah seriously. Not to say critique, there are many critiques that I have of Nkrumah. But I don't take people who don't have a balanced appreciation for the legacy of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah seriously. Because whatever you're going to tell me, within the context of coming out of a colonial nation, within the context of fighting French, British, and American neocolonization, it is in fact monumental, yes, that all of these things were achieved. Monumental. With all the flaws, with all the contradiction, yes, with all the mistake them. And there is no nation in its history that has not made massive mistakes politically and economically. None whatsoever. But when you consider the fact that all of this was achieved in the space of 9 years, it's a madness. It's a madness. All right. And as a Garveyite, as I said, many Garveyites have a great appreciation, yeah, for the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. Partly because he adopted much of the sensibilities of Garvey himself in terms of pushing towards industrialization and the unified Africa, in particular. Yeah, he has his departures from Garvey as well. You'll find critiques of Garvey in Nkrumah. All right, but one of the aspects, yeah, of Nkrumah that has to be appreciated is this focus on industrialization and protection from the neocolonizer. Simple as you take it, even Garvey was discussing neocolonization before neocolonization actually took hold, yes, post the independence era. And so it's that foresight and that conviction to move on that program that we have to appreciate. Yeah, 9 years all of this took place. 9 years. Yeah. And if one cannot appreciate that, then it's not a serious thing. The only people that don't appreciate this, really and truly, are people that have another agenda, that are really have an anti-African liberation and a pro-Western agenda. Yeah. And that's what we have to appreciate, brothers and sisters. All right. It appears that we have lost Auntie Affiong. Unfortunately, so we're not going to be able to get a final. Oh, 1 second. Looks like we got something here. Hold on. Auntie Affiong, are you up?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, Auntie. Okay, we'll try to get you for a while, try to get a final word. But okay, you're here. All right. So go ahead, Auntie. If you we're gonna wrap up the show now. So any of your final thoughts, feel free to share.
No, just you.
Oh, just like that. Madness. So yeah, brothers and sisters, that's what we're on. Auntie Affiong just dropped off. Just as we got her back, MI6 and all these things. But it appears to be important to me to just get this message out there. Yeah, just to appreciate what was achieved. Yeah, and allow people to appreciate what was achieved. We can then go into the different critiques, yes, and challenges. Yeah, those things are important to discuss. Let's not get it twisted. They're important to discuss. All right. But if we don't start here, then we're just confusing our people, brothers and sisters. Yeah. Stay tuned. I'm gonna play you a calypso that is dedicated to Ghana independence. All right. And yeah, we're gonna have more of these kind of conversations in the coming months, brothers and sisters. There are no more at gotkushTV, so I'm going to wrap up the show. Okay. So with that, we say Tenda Mwali, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Mozima Mokuro. We give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. Share. Ghana, democracy under fire. delving deep into the political theater of Ghana in the lead up to the general election in December 2024. We welcome activist, organizer, and writer Bonchi Anyete as our regular co-host and analyst, breaking down the dynamics in his unique and entertaining way. Tune in to our very first show, Decoding Ghana's Political Theatre, Tuesday, the 27th of February, 2024, from 8 p.m. GMT, live on gotkushTV. And we look forward to you joining us every fourth Tuesday of the month throughout 2024. Ghana, democracy under fire. This is a show not to be missed.
This day will never be forgotten. The 6th of March 1957, when the Gold Coast successfully get your independence officially. Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim. We will be jolly, merry and gay. The 6th of March, Independence Day. Dr. Nkrumah went out his way to make the Gold Coast what it is today. He endeavored continually to bring us freedom and liberty. Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim. We will be jolly, merry and gay. The 6th of March, Independence Day. The doctor began as agitator, then he became popular leader. He continued to go further, and now he is Ghana's prime minister. Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim. We will be jolly, merry and gay. The 6th of March, Independence Day. The national flag is a lovely scene with beautiful colors, red, gold and green, and a black star in the center representing the freedom of Africa. Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim. We will be jolly, merry and gay. The 6th of March, Independence Day. Congratulations from Haile Selassie was proudly received by everybody. He particularly commented on the doctor's move to self-government. Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim. We will be jolly, merry and gay. The 6th of March, Independence Day.
And so one of the things that, we must push, all of us, is this fundamental question of the global nature of our African identities. That we stop, to see ourselves as Nigerians and Gabonese and, Ghanaians and Congolese and all these other nonsensical identities that we have. Not just that we talk about them like we're talking now, but that it's actually, embedded in our spirits, in our psyche, and in our approach to our work. Because those of you, who are on the continent know that we face, this crisis of religion, this crisis of ethnicism that is tearing us apart. And the only solution to that is going to start to address things and see things as a global body. And that when we speak of a Federation of African States, we're not just referring to us on the continent, but that we are coming to the table with all of our power. And our power means the millions of Africans in the diaspora that there's that clarity of understanding. So it's not something we just talk about or we preach about, but that we actually begin to implement.